Islam. Women are conditioned to police one another instead of unifying against the system that is clearly oppressing them. Compliance is rewarded and resistance leads to punishment. I mean, I hope that changes. I genuinely do. But women's equality is about having a choice. And if you look at countries like Afghanistan, where it's gotten to the point where women are only allowed to see with one eye, you can clearly see that in most cases, women do not have a choice when they live in a society that is governed under Sharia law. You can argue with me about it all you want. The facts are there. And even in the countries where Sharia law isn't as enforced, it's very frowned upon when women don't wear hijab by their communities. Don't even try to argue with me about this. I lived in the Middle East, okay? I lived in Lebanon. And out of all the countries in the Middle East, Lebanon is the most westernized, okay? And in certain parts of it over there, it's very frowned upon for you not to be wearing a hijab. Any system that only works if women comply.
We have too much stuff, and it's the curse of mass production capitalism, right? Well, I mean, they had less stuff in the past, or did they? They certainly didn't have a drawer full of mystery chargers and cords 100 years ago, but maybe that junk drawer was filled with other things. We seem to be constantly at odds with clutter and things in our lives and homes. There's this weird trend of people going analog, which doesn't even mean that, and ditching their phones and computers to simplify everything, only to find they now need calculators, writing supplies, books, maps, and so much more to replace a tiny box. But we certainly get a lot of flack for spending too much on frivolous items. If only we hadn't bought that new phone or fancy coffee maker, maybe we could just save up for buying a house or just buying groceries. They must have had way less stuff if they could afford all those things a century ago when they weren't so mass-produced. Or maybe it's all just a load of myths. Well, first we should probably define what stuff is. A century ago, they used terms like household furnishings or goods. It basically encompasses everything in your living space that isn't permanent. For the purposes of this video, we're going to narrow that down to everything that isn't furniture as well. So it's everything from decor to kitchen appliances to towels to books. If you'd have to pack it up to move, it's stuff. And well, it does seem like we have a lot of it. Certainly too much when it comes to finding a place for it all. Did they have that problem too? Here's the thing. We don't keep lists of how much stuff we actually have. Maybe the valuable things for insurance purposes, but even a small apartment can fit in dozens, if not hundreds, of items. And that's the same problem we have with researching the past. They have occasional records like probates, but those only list the valuable things after someone passes, not everything. And they aren't always going to be the best average. Our quantities probably vary wildly throughout our lives. So where do we even begin to look for ideas of what we spend? I'm actually aiming for a bit of a range this time. What bare minimum is to what is available to the lower and middle class. No gold-plated anything, just regular stuff. Lists which arrived in their mailbox, just like hundreds of advertisements that keep arriving in your inbox. Not always wanted, but certainly always there. Maybe to the list of death taxes we add advertising spam. Which actually brings me to the sponsor for today's video, Incogni. Incogni tracks down and removes your personal data from hundreds of websites, in just the last few months, they found almost 800 places where my private information has been picked up by data brokers and sold over and over again. Who knows who? Addresses, phone numbers, employers, financial info, even shopping habits have all been handed around. As of now, more than 700 of those have been successfully taken down, and it only takes a few days for resolution. And if they come across anything beyond their list of problems, they have custom removals as well. With their unlimited family and family benefit plans, you just submit a link where your information is being exposed, and they'll submit a request for you. It's not just about stopping those annoying fake calls, texts, though. I have noticed a significant difference in how many scams have come through. It really doesn't take much to piece together enough information to have your identity stolen or accounts opened up under your info. It feels like there's so many data breaches these days, you don't even notice them. And there's just no way to keep up with how fast it spreads. Incogni actually has an estimated time saved ticker on your dashboard, and mine is already over 550 hours. There's no way I could handle that by myself. Everything from your contacts to health, employment, graphics, and even family connections is regularly picked up and spawned. So take back your personal data with Incogni. Go to incogni.com/reportrudolph and use code reportrudolph to get 60% off an annual plan. So let's start with the basics. What they needed just to operate in a regular way. The bare minimum to function is actually something that gets listed quite often throughout the century. Now, this is not for the single man of the past who hires out cleaning and eats in restaurants, just like those that have a single fold chair and plastic cups today. These lists were created by magazines, etiquette manuals, and even the government are for young families, those just starting out and moving into a house for the first time. They often come alongside a budget, but unlike the clothing budget, which usually placed third after housing and food, home goods and other stuff don't have a large annual allowance. It's not because people didn't spend money on that range, more that the expectation was that it would be loved moments. Getting married, the first home, having kids, moving, expanding, etc. Major events that could be saved for, or ideally, not a regularly reoccurring thing. Unlike clothing, which while clothing kind of counts as stuff, I've talked about that extensively before, they had a huge chunk of their annual
Alex Jones has been trying to warn all of us for decades. He's accused powerful people of hiding their evil acts in plain sight.
Now have you put Bohemian grove information out?
And then he was also right about Bohemian.
He warned us about the elite pedo rings.
He was the guy who told me about Epstein's Island more than a decade ago.
Clinton took multiple trips to Epstein's private island where he kept young women as slaves.
They fly famous, rich scientists and politicians, and they compromise them with underage girls.
Police infiltrating protests to turn them violent.
Alex Jones had a great video called 9/11: The Road to Tyranny. It was the first time I really understood that agent provocateurs are a government strategy.
He even warned us about Bill Gates.
And I've seen Bill Gates say, we've got to get this down to zero. And he puts his clicker and puts an image of a human up there.
Most people dismissed him. A lot of what he said was absurd.
Gay people, I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
But the more prominent he became, the more these warnings took their psychological toll, sending him spiraling deep into alcoholism, which pushed him into even more erratic behavior. Behavior that would one day destroy him completely, almost like it was done by design, by the very people he warned us of. Because over time, piece by piece, parts of what he'd been saying started to surface.
I did take those plaintiffs, sir.
But by that point, it had already cost him his entire life and reputation.
It is not going to work that you are going to...
I'm sorry, I'll correct you.
You see, Alex Jones wasn't always such a mess. He wasn't this alcoholic Adderall addict, saying whatever he can to get clicks. In fact, in 1995, Jones was just a local Texas news reporter, and he was pretty handsome and eccentric, although still grounded and tuned in to reality. He liked a beer, but not too much, and he was proud of being in good shape.
I do drink some alcohol, though, and I probably support doing it because it makes me fat when I drink 2 or 3 beers before I go to bed.
His driving force back then were his worries about expanding government power.
Okay, I don't care about being a Democrat. I care about getting my taxes cut. I care about getting government cut.
His biggest claims to fame back then was when George Bush had him dragged out of a press conference for challenging him while being governor of Texas.
Sir, shouldn't we abolish the Federal Reserve and the CFR?
And he was convinced that governments everywhere by nature are controlled by a shadowy group of elites. But back then, it was the Council of Foreign Relations he mistrusted most.
That's the real reality that none of you will talk about, most of you are members.
Through history, governments have always been dangerous. You know, a certain elite controls everybody.
Until we realize that Republicans and Democrats are the same people at the top, 2 sides of the same coin, puppet A and puppet B, we are not going to effectively change this until we are honest about who we're up against.
Back then, Jones had no idea who he would one day become. The US presidential candidates would invoke his name on the campaign trail, and he had no idea how this success would eat away his sanity and his entire life, driving him so deep into alcohol abuse that he just became unrecognizable, and that the warnings he gave us would eventually turn to psychosis. But to understand Alex Jones, you have to understand that back in the day, he was an early genius of the internet, someone who adopted it before anyone else, realizing it could give Infowars unlimited reach. The reality is, it wasn't a prescient move anticipating the web's domination. It was solely because he was booted out of traditional news for claims about Waco and the Oklahoma City bombings.
We're traveling, myself, Steve Lane, and many others, to Waco, the scene of the April 19, 1993 butcher massacre of Clinton, the impotent, bus-filled agent trying to feel empowered, ordered his henchmen to go out and murder a church community and then drum up all sorts of propaganda as a test to see if they can kill people in the future.
His take on a story was always through a lens traditional media did not want to look at. But being cut loose from radio and local news set him free to follow the stories that really interested him, and one of those was Bohemian Grove. Bohemian Grove is a rumored paganistic society made up of elites from around the world, with some of the most powerful US government figures among its ranks.
And as I attacked the Bushes for being some of the highest level members of Bohemian Grove, it's now out that Henry Kissinger has been the high priest in past years, where they do these mock human sacrifices, and some say for real.
But back then, Jones didn't have an audience of millions or a massive fortune at his disposal. He was just a determined guerrilla-style investigative journalist, and the seeds of his manic brand were already starting to sprout.
I don't want to be part of their sick control freak system. I don't like these degenerate, inbred, New World Order crowd people. They're not going to run my life. They're not going to control me. And I'm going to try to expose them.
So Jones actually decided to go out and locate Bohemian Grove and infiltrate one of their ceremonies to film the rituals. And he wasn't alone.
This is the story of one man's attempts to infiltrate and secretly film inside Bohemian Grove.
Now it seems like an unlikely partnership, but Jones ended up joining forces with the British investigative journalist John Bronson to sneak into Bohemian Grove for a Channel 4 documentary, The Secret Rulers of the World.
Well, here we are, folks. Turning on to the Bohemian Highway and Bohemian Grove. We're going to find out what in the New World Order is going on here.
We were there in person. Those were actual crosses that they were burning.
For Jones, this was the equivalent of a flat earther reaching the icy ring surrounding Earth. And to be fair, it was completely insane what they discovered. The place was full of roped up people practically wetting themselves with excitement in anticipation of their weird ritual of chanting and burning an effigy of an ancient owl god, all surrounded by some of the most influential and powerful people in the world. For Jones, it was absolutely clear vindication that his New World Order really did exist. Now he was convinced that more circles and elite figures from around the world were operating in secret, doing terrible things with impunity protected by the highest powers in the world.
You cover up a crime you're involved in. Of course the globalists hire a bunch of pedos to run things.
Even after that, almost no one was paying attention. It took Jones many years to become the whiskey-guzzling rabble-rouser we all know him as, because even though we look back on it more fondly now, the 90s was a pretty dull time for conspiracy theorists. Western economies were strong, politics was centrist, tech was still pretty harmless and fun. Nintendo and Sony were the giants everyone knew knew about. Not Palantir and TikTok. People weren't hearing things about Jeffrey Epstein compromising the elites in our government. There seemingly wasn't much to be suspicious of. But then September 11th happened. This sent conspiracies mainstream, and it gave Jones the hard launch he'd been looking for.
On 9/11, on 9/11 of September 2001, yesterday, as we do this show live, a mass bombing that I have predicted for the last 5 years occurred. They are going to now use terrorism as a pretext to destroy our civil liberties.
The moment shattered everything. The illusion of global peace most Westerners lived in. The basic level of trust most people had in governments and militaries. The security people felt living in the richest, most powerful nations on Earth. Suddenly now, people were questioning everything. For Jones, this was confirmation that everything he'd been warning people about for years was true. But he took it to another level, and he didn't waste any time doing it.
Either the government actually carried out this bombing themselves, the New World Order occupational government, to create the crisis, to offer the solution, or, ladies and gentlemen, they allowed terrorists from somewhere in the world who were state-sponsored because of the sophistication of this to engage in this sinister activity.
Despite a ramshackle online setup with a limited following, Jones started to make a splash with his relentless frenzy claims that it was an inside job. He warned us this was the latest in a string of false flag operations by the US government to justify the expansion of government and the rollout of mass surveillance.
Governments have staged terror attacks throughout history or allowed terrorists to attack as a pretext to invade and enslave the population.
Unlike today, the inside job element of this warning didn't go down with the country reeling from this incident, but it did bring in the USA's dark history of false flag operations into the open again, which was helped by Jones' repeated rants about Operation Northwoods, a rejected 1960s US plan to covertly facilitate Cuban attacks on civilian targets, all to justify a war against the communist Castro regime. As a result, Infowars started gaining some serious ground.
For those of you that can't tell, this is a small room that I picked to use rather than the larger studio. It's much simpler and I can run everything myself.
Even still in his tiny little studio. As soon as people realized the horrors of the Patriot, among the horrors of the Iraq War, his rising popularity and fame allowed for a much more slick operation.
I'm Alex Jones at Real Alex Jones. Stay with us, this is a war.
The more extreme his claims became,
you support raping children with battery acid.
The bigger his audience got, and the more rapid his rants became, the more his viewers lapped it up.
Children walking around with their bald heads, dying of cancer all around me! Why? This is a normal response to them!
So by the early 2010s, he now had a large but still pretty niche audience tuning in daily for his hours-long high blood pressure live rants on everything, from fluoride in the water to elite banking cartels preparing for the end of the world. But the 2010s also saw two huge events that would rattle the US further. And while this made Jones an enormous figure, it shattered his sanity even further, convincing him that he was now on a God-given mission to deliver the world from the evil of the New World Order, which, being one of the most stressful things to take on, catalyzed his drinking.
Despite the incredible mission I've got and the whole world counting on me more and more to be the leader of a movement against tyranny, it's just to have hundreds of people coming up with light in their eyes just telling me how great I am. Let me tell you something, as good as I am, ladies and gentlemen, I like to chew tobacco, I like to drink whiskey, and I'll be honest with you, I have constant struggles and to, get a bottle of Jack Daniels. I don't even have the self-control.
The moment came where one of Jones's most outlandish claims was in part vindicated.
It was a staged event to launch the Iraq War and to set up a domestic police state here in the United States.
In 2013, CIA whistleblower Edward Snowden fled to Russia. Working with a group of international journalists, Snowden released a load of classified CIA files that sent shockwaves around the world. In the wake of September 11, the USA, under Section 215 of the Patriot Act, had been secretly collecting the phone records and data of hundreds of millions of people in a global surveillance system.
Well, what happened in the wake of 9/11 was a whole bunch of government officials got together behind closed doors, and this was actually led Dick Cheney, a guy named David Addington, wrote a secret legal interpretation. And so they did this, and this became a mass surveillance program called Stellar Wind, which they said was supposed to monitor the phone calls and internet communications, emails, and things like that of everybody in the United States and around the world.
Suddenly, Jones's fringe ideas about the deep state and mass surveillance of people weren't so ridiculous. People's newfound disillusionment with authority and the status quo cut through US politics, and Jones, having warned about this stuff for years, was finally the voice of a growing movement of people becoming increasingly paranoid about the government.
Unelected deep state operatives who defy the voters to push their own secret agendas are truly a threat to democracy itself.
And his own paranoia is only compounded when he finds himself at the center of a brutal presidential campaign between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, getting attacked by major political and media figures regularly across the world.
Radio host Alex Jones, who claims that 9/11 and the Oklahoma City bombings were inside jobs.
Trump, however, openly stated his admiration for him, which swelled Jones's audience even further.
Saying your reputation's amazing. I will not let you down. You will be very, very impressed, I hope. And I think we'll be speaking a lot.
His drain the swamp mantra and endless attacks on the status quo found a powerful supporter in Jones, whose interview with Trump in 2016 is said to have helped Trump get over the line and into the White House.
If I'm elected president, we are going to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C.
So suddenly Jones's once fringe ideas were now being amplified by the most powerful man in the world. The head of the government he'd spent years attacking was now his personal champion. This was Jones's peak, but after a peak, there is always a fall, and Jones had a long way to fall from the heights he'd reached. With his drinking and Adderall use getting out of control, his marriage was collapsing.
I can't stand to be at a party where alcohol's being drunk and not drink it. I am weak. My flesh is weak.
His wife divorces him, and a nasty and at times very public custody battle for their children engulfs his private life, with his wife doing TV interviews attacking his character. People in Texas start filming him and harassing him in public.
That's definitely him. He's a rage-filled person.
After a 9-day trial, a jury awarded Kelly Jones joint custody of their kids, making her home the primary residence instead of their father's.
He appears on Infowars looking worse and worse, often with red eyes and a swollen face.
Because then it was a secret. I had a divorce 3 years ago. I tried to keep my kids out of it.
You can see his brash character start to fall apart at the seams. There were days he almost burst into tears on air.
But there were good people.
He also starts becoming way more direct about the elite circles he believed were running the world. He also speaks more openly about powerful pedo networks, and he was one of the first people to bring public attention towards Jeffrey Epstein's first arrest, when most people still had no idea who Epstein even was.
When you've got the same FBI a couple of years ago with Jeffrey Epstein, with the Lolita Express, with Bill Clinton on at least 16 round-trip flights to the Island, he got convicted of running.
And years later, the truth about the scale of his crimes filled the headlines every day. Only more than 10 years later have some of the most central figures and long-time targets of Joneses, like the Clintons, been dragged into depositions to answer for their friendship with Epstein.
Do you believe you were a victim of a Jeffrey Epstein intel operation? Do you think that you might have been caught up in some of what he was maybe potentially doing?
Did you ever receive a massage or have physical contact from her or anyone else on that trip?
You've seen the pictures. There was one time when I was sitting up and I got a back rub on that quote.
And Jeffrey Epstein, who had regular orgies at his Caribbean compound that the former president visited multiple times.
His audience kept growing. Jones became ever more convinced of himself. The threats from the elites and mainstream media grew, and the pressure was now mounting. But still, he kept the show going. Now he was deciding to take aim at another billionaire in his line of sight, one he'd warned us about for years and who had been ignored: Bill Gates. Jones was an early critic of Gates and his artificial nice guy act. He saw the contradictions in Gates' claims to want to help the world and poor people, all while desiring to control overpopulation by decreasing the global population.
2 weeks ago, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation secret meeting of the rich with Warren Buffett and Ted Turner, and it said the main agenda was reduce our population by 80%.
Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Particularly in poorer places like Africa.
But it's really Africa that still has a doubling in population to 2050.
Of course, Jones's take on Gates' plan for Africa's population growth was a little less nuanced.
Murder Africa! Invasion force! Release us! I mean, these are kook cult demons, hardcore evil. I mean, these people are flaming scum.
While regular people were horrified that one of the blandest billionaire geeks on the planet was also a part of the Epstein files, Jones was now vindicated and climbed even further into his own mania. By this point, he was no longer on the fringes, he was now mainstream. His YouTube channel was clocking up more views than established broadcasters like MSNBC. He was worth hundreds of millions, had hundreds of millions of followers, had the president's ear. He was completely untouchable, or so he thought. You see, he starts getting drunk on air more often, with wild appearances on podcasts like The Joe Rogan Experience, where his unhinged state is overlooked as it's just part of his brand now.
No, I love being here. I'll sit here and like tell fart jokes if you want. I'd rather get drunk and just have a good time.
This episode, number 911, was done purposefully by Rogan in honor of Jones's career turning point.
I knew I go, okay, there's a certain number of podcasts I have to do to get this to 9/11. So Jamie and I worked it out, and we did it!
It was hugely successful, the biggest mainstream conspiracy theorist being egged on by arguably the world's biggest interviewer, which then sent Alex Jones into the stratosphere, and he didn't disappoint. He was high on his own fumes and happy to say absolutely anything, knowing people would still believe, and he'd face no consequences. On one of Joe Rogan's most popular episodes of all time, that has since been deleted, he appears in a NASA shirt, and is seemingly more crazy than he's ever been before. Over the course of nearly 5 hours, he rants about this kind of stuff.
Native Americans you can mind control really fast. 20 years ago, they had spiders that produced body armor, spider guts, okay? They have human-animal hybrids 30 years ago. They've got giant human tissue farms. Right. Aliens are real. They're creating human-animal hybrid. They admit 5G in all the studies, LA Times, causes massive mutation and cancer.
Wait a minute,
and literally rattles your DNA apart. All of our kids are under attack. NASA is the German breakaway government.
It was from this point onwards that Jones never returned to his previous more stable states. Adderall and alcohol had now taken the wheel, and his downfall was near.
Jones was arrested in Texas on a misdemeanor charge of driving while intoxicated.
His claims didn't need to make sense. That wasn't his stock in trade anymore. He didn't need to be right, he just needed to go further. His off-air actions got worse. He very clearly starts cracking, and it's only a matter of time before he gives the people who want him gone exactly what they need to finish him, as he crosses a line he can't come back from, making his now infamous claims about Sandy Hook never occurring, that the children didn't exist and the grieving parents were actors. He'd actually been saying this stuff for years prior to the podcast and this point, but now those words were coming back to bite him. After his followers turned on the parents, and all the evidence proved him wrong, he had to be dragged kicking and screaming to walk it all back. This was the first time he'd actually had to take accountability for his more wild statements. Although he questions the legitimacy of the attack when it happens, he isn't famous enough for anyone to care. As his star rises, his repeated claims are heard everywhere, bringing Jones all the wrong kinds of attention. His followers turn on the parents, sending them death threats and accuse them of faking their grief. And so in 2018, a way to silence him was found. He could have Infowars, but no big platform allows him to use their base anymore. He was taken off the biggest social media platforms all in one single moment: YouTube, Facebook, and then Twitter, wiping out a huge chunk of his audience and his revenue. For those who didn't know Jones, now he was infamous for being one of the most silenced individuals online. His daily audience then fell from 1.4 million daily views to 715,000, and it only went down from there. Suddenly, all those huge popular Joe Rogan episodes were wiped off YouTube and Spotify. Anything with Jones's name was considered hate speech. Bootleg re-uploads are quickly taken down, and it's clear that tech companies are serious about silencing him. He's seen as too toxic, and they're not going to jeopardize their profits for a wild card, no matter how much his supporters shout about free speech. Even when the evidence on Sandy Hook eventually proved him wrong, he was dragged kicking and screaming to walk it all back in court, as he's not used to actually having to take accountability for those wild statements. In his trial, his lawyer tries to dismiss his claims as part of an eccentric character Jones plays on air. Jones himself confesses he has psychosis, which is at the root of a lot of his claims, but it doesn't fly.
And I remind myself that almost developed psychosis back in the past, right?
The judge sides with the victims and orders Jones to pay an eye-watering $1.5 billion in damages, forcing him to declare bankruptcy, and there is no recovering. But it makes you wonder, what stuff does this guy really believe and warn us genuinely, and what does he say as just part of an act? as Alex, for all his antics, is a really smart guy. He's an incredible speaker, and when you look at his past and all the warnings he gave us, a lot of them turned out to be true. He even said back in the day he has all this performance just to be entertaining.
I get pretty hot on a lot of these shows, and I wouldn't say really angry, just more, excited. I mean, for me to, try to make it entertaining and at the same time give people information, I let myself get pretty excited.
But from that point onwards, he realized that the more he lent into extreme behavior, the more interested people were. The algorithm favors extreme content. So when did this act become his actual personality and astray his warnings? Well, very few people actually knew him well. His ex-wife told the media that the screaming, rapid-fire monologuing conspiracy theorist is just who he is.
Is this acting or is this real? That's definitely him. He's a rage-filled person.
But this was also in the middle of a very messy custody battle for their kids during a very messy divorce. Only really 2 other people genuinely knew him since he was an apolitical upstart shouting at George Bush in the 90s. And what they have to say about him fills in a lot of the blanks around someone who is clearly gifted, but also deeply troubled.
He's been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. So I think an awful lot of the things that he does is because he has that disorder.
John Ronson is one of the very few people who actually tried to get to the heart of Alex Jones, and after learning his origin story from an unnamed employee of Jones's, Ronson revealed the reason Jones is a conspiracy theorist.
Alex has an origin story about how he was hounded out of Dallas and had to move to Austin because he uncovered police corruption and the police hounded him out of town.
They had cops up there that I knew were drug dealers. I stood up and said, I was at a pool party. He was selling cocaine and ecstasy last week. They took me in an office, ran my head in the wall, told me, we're going to kill you and have black people with foot-long dick you in the ass tomorrow. But they said, you're going to move out of this town right now.
It's because he was a bully and everyone was afraid of him. And one day he was invited to a party in a barn, but it was a trap. He was basically the victim of a conspiracy. And it was all the kids who he had bullied, beaten half to death. And that's why he left town.
But Alex Jones got dumped on his head when he was in high school. Speaking about getting bullied in high school, this guy picked him up and pile drived him, slammed him on the concrete on his head when he was 15, 16 years old, and he was ever since then.
And this guy said, isn't this extraordinary that Alex became a conspiracy theorist because he'd been the victim of a conspiracy? Not uncovered a conspiracy, but been the victim of one.
Rogan says that Jones wasn't lying about Sandy Hook, it's just that he's not even capable of thinking straight.
He wasn't lying. He just was wrong. He really believed that the government had faked it to try to confiscate people's weapons. Like he's just. Well,
I mean,
it was a haze of drugs and booze and a psychotic break and like legitimate traumatic brain injury.
And then you see him today, where he's barely able to speak because he's so drunk on just a handful of podcasts that will have him on.
It is not going to work that you are going to.
Indeed. All desperately trying to escape the financial ruin by declaring bankruptcy for losing the trial. Perhaps the final nail in his coffin is that his political North Star has strayed so far with his attacks on Iran that Jones now finds himself back on the outside of mainstream political thinking.
That I have to intensify my criticism of President Trump. Trump's out of his mind. We didn't betray Trump. He betrayed us. But just on the genocide issue alone, Trump says, I will genocide your entire country, which is an open war crime. Even say you'll do it when you have the weapons. This is terrorism.
The America First, No Foreign Wars, MAGA movement that Jones championed was thrown out of favor in return to the old US politics of Middle Eastern wars that he used to criticize so fiercely. Along with everything that happened with Epstein, now Jones is in favor of having Trump impeached. This is something he vehemently criticized when it happened in 2019, relentlessly attacking the Democrats for the move and calling it a hoax.
So what do you think's coming next with the whole impeachment hoax? Because it is a hoax now. They're saying they may never send it to the Senate.
It got so bad that Trump even responded on Truth Social, calling him bankrupt Alex Jones. And now Alex Jones even denies that he was ever a conspiracy theorist, saying this was all just a ploy by the media and CIA to undermine him.
That's why I get mad at the shows that are, innuendo and conspiracy theories. I've never been a conspiracy theorist, folks. That's what the media calls me. That's a CIA term.
In the end, it's not really clear whether he believes what he's saying or just needs people to listen to him.
This show is about information, not continual entertainment.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with qualified therapists. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/super. That's betterhelp.com/super. Harry Potter killed Dobby the house elf. And I can prove it.
Harry Potter meant to me, Mom. Seriously, Dobby.
Hey, brother. Yeah, buckle up, folks. We're in for a news fest. That's code for news. This episode could be sad. I'm already combating it. We can do this. Anyway, Dobby is, of course, one of the purest and most beloved characters in our vast landscape of story. He's, of course, silly, funny, adorable, and occasionally misguided. Attaway, Dobbert. Attaway. But he's also brave, earnest, and loyal, completely and utterly of his own accord. He makes friends easily and stands by those friends and stands up for what is right. In some ways, he almost reminds me of Sirius at his core, would rather die than betray his friends. And in some ways, that might be exactly what happened. Now, obviously, it's easy to blame Bellatrix for this death because she does, after all, throw a knife at him with the intended purpose of killing him, and it does hit him, and he does die. But I am here to tell you that while she may have delivered the blow, it's Harry who sealed Dobby's fate. Hey, brother! But y'all, I want to take a brief pause right there to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Shopify. Ben Lure incoming. Before I ever said, hey, brother, for the first time, I was scrubbing fish bowls. Really big fish bowls, maybe, but that was the gig. I especially like growing coral and thought it was cool that I was doing it in the mountains. So for a brief spell, I ran a website called Mountain Corals. And as you can imagine, despite holding the title of Chief Scrubber, I knew nothing about running a website. Fortunately, Shopify knows everything I don't. And they've got range. So anything from my hyper simple mountain corals all the way to the likes of Gymshark, Heinz, or Mattel. For me, aside from templates and customer service though, having shipping resources on hand was clutch because all corals require overnight shipping. That's true. I also got these little urine containers that I put them in to keep them nice and safe so that they can all knock them out. So even though ultimately the world of YouTube managed to outpace Coral Farmer, Shopify has been a vital tool in my journey in more ways than one. So now it is time to turn your what ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/SCB. Again, that is shopify.com/SCB. One last time for safety, shopify.com/SCB. Link in the description down below. Now back to the video, I will have you guys know that I had to watch and also read Dobby's death again in order to write this, and for that, you're welcome, and also I hate you.
Toby, you're tacky and I hate you.
I mean, not literally, y'all are wonderful, but you get it. But let's just jump right on into this one because I think unlike many videos, we need to start with the answer and conclude with the supporting evidence. The premise begins with Harry's introduction to our beloved dumpster at Privet Drive, when Harry is in his room making no noise and pretending to not exist, or at least that's what he intends to do, but can't because he has a very unavoidable house elf on his bed. Yeah! Woohoo! We learn right away that Dobby has found some measure of loophole in order to visit the Dursleys and warn Harry to not return to school for his second year because danger awaits.
You've murdered my cat.
Not killed.
Dobby only meant to maim, Mom. Seriously injured.
But Harry's all, Hogwarts is my home! And we're all like, yeah, but Harry, if you just listened and went on to live a muggle existence, then maybe Dobby could have lived, okay? Like, selfish? Much? You know, Harry, I'm just kidding, of course, he dies for everyone, he's a good dude, but also, like, Dobby does it first, so, like, copycat much? Like, geez, man, come up with your own material. Lazy. Right away, though, we're introduced to the dangers that lie ahead for year 2, and also that Dobby is going to go to lengths to save Harry's life.
Why is it always me?
He's hidden letters from Harry's friends to make him think that they've abandoned him. He blocks the platform to the Hogwarts Express to prevent Harry and Ron from boarding the train. And last, but certainly not least,
you made that bludger chase after me.
You know, he really likes that maim or seriously injure approach. I dare say it's third on his list after Harry and then, of course, Socks.
Better clear off before my bones come back.
But Dobby's heart is obviously in the right place, even if he's limited in terms of how he's able to ultimately intervene. And in time, we learn that Dobby belongs to the Malfoys and discovered the plot to reopen the Chamber of Secrets in advance. Then Harry, chosen one that he is, defies all of Dobby's obstacles, but recognizing his terrible existence and the core sentiment behind the house elf's attempts to blockade him, Harry tricks Malfoy into handing Dobby Harry's own slimy sock. And Dobby is free! Afterward is when the key discussion takes place, when Dobby asks Harry if there is anything at all he can do to repay Harry for his kindness, and Harry makes the following request. Promise never to try and save my life again. The elf's ugly brown face splits suddenly into a wide two-piece smile. And here is where things get interesting, because this is in no way an unbreakable vow, at least not in the way that we understand it. But then, house elves do possess a completely different brand of magic.
Are you saying you can operate in and out of this room? Could you take us with you? Of course, I'm an elf.
So humble, am I right? And yet, that particular occasion is of important note because...
Help us.
Harry and company are trapped in the basement of Malfoy Manor, and none other than Dobby arrives and...
Dobby's come to rescue Harry Potter, of course.
Oh no, oh no. Oh no, 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 no. Dobby, you can't! No! Dobby! But you, of course, know what happens next.
Help me!
I hate it. I hate it. It's the worst. I mean, it might be some of Dan Rad's best acting, but boy, howdy, it stings. Like someone just took a knife and just... Too soon? Too soon. I think I know how to lighten the mood. That's better. Okay, so clearly you see where I'm going with this. Harry makes Dobby promise to never try and save his life again. And here is Dobby explicitly saving his life again.
Again? Freaking again!
You see? So that's where the question comes into play, because as mentioned, this is not an unbreakable vow. No magic was involved in Dobby's promise. It's clearly not meant to be a
binding magical contract
of any kind, but it does resolve in exactly the way an unbreakable vow would resolve if, you broke the vow.
You die.
But this is where Dobby's loyalty to Harry is at the root of the question.
Dobby will always be there for Harry Potter.
Always.
Dobby's actually able to defy the wishes of the Malfoys to try and warn Harry of the dangers in his second year. This is despite the fact that Dobby is very much so in whatever kind of magical enslavement that binds a house elf to their master. In fact, it is so powerful that even when Harry becomes master of Creature per Sirius's will, Creature truly cannot disobey a direct order from Harry. Won't. Creature's voice had risen to a scream. Harry could think of nothing to say except, "Creature, shut up!" It looked for a moment as though Creature was going to choke. He grabbed his throat, his mouth still working furiously, his eyes bulging. After a few seconds of frantic gulping, he threw himself face forward onto the carpet and beat the floor with his hands and feet, giving himself over to a violent but entirely silent tantrum. This is the typical magical contract that exists between wizards and house elves on display. Creature absolutely does not want to abide by Harry's command and resents this passage of command from Sirius to Harry. However, he cannot disobey a direct order. He can, of course, find wiggle room within in order to behave counter to his master's demands. This is exactly what happens when Sirius orders Creature to get out, something Harry, of all people, is actually quick to realize. He couldn't have left, could he? Said Harry. I mean, when you said out, maybe he thought you meant get out of the house? Sirius contests this right away, but Dumbledore does confirm later that this is exactly what happened. That detail is vital to point out, though, not because after being freed from the Malfoys, Dobby finds a new master or anything. I mean, of course, instead he finds employment.
I'm escaping to the one place that hasn't been corrupted by capitalism.
Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
What is important to realize, though, is that Dobby seems to now be operating under an enforcement of his own design. And we see it best in Half-Blood Prince, when Harry is highly suspicious of Draco's movements throughout the course of the year and suddenly has a brain blast. There was a way to have Malfoy followed. How could he have forgotten? Why hadn't he thought of it before? But the question was, how to call him? What did you do? Quietly, tentatively, Harry spoke into the darkness. Creature? Creature appears on the spot, but he's not alone. He was in the act of wrestling with, you guessed it, Dobby. I personally like to think Dobby just hit him with the old frog splash, as it were. Oh, Dobby. He would look so great with a mustache and red spandex, right? On second thought, maybe just the mustache to start. In this scene, Harry asks both Creature and Dobby to tail Draco, and growing wise to Sirius's mistake, gives them all sorts of very specific instructions as to not tip him off along the way. And those are all really good safeguards. However, well, they've been following Malfoy requirement, he said. Night and day, croaked Creature. Dobby has not slept for a week, Harry Potter, said Dobby, proudly swaying where he stood. Come on, Harold. You gotta let him sleep.
I'm sorry.
But also the point I'm trying to illustrate is that Dobby was following Harry's command to the letter. And of course, Harry isn't his master. Dobby has no master. He is completely and truly a free elf.
Dobby is a free elf.
Also, just a small brief micro theory as long as we're here. What Dobby and Creature discover while tailing Malfoy is that he's going to the Room of Requirement, another place that you have to be very specific about what you're asking it for. You've got to ask it for exactly what you need. Like, oh, I don't want any Kara supporters to be able to get in. And it'll do it for you. You've just got to make sure you close the loopholes. Neville's the man. And who is it that shows Harry the Room of Requirement in the first place? Dobby! So I think that there's a chance that house elves may be the architects of the Room of Requirement.
Right?
Anyway, back to Dobby and his death. I shouldn't have changed subjects. It's just this miserable coming back to this again. But here's the thing. Dobby comes in clutch for Harry constantly. As mentioned, he's chosen the requirement. He is the one who actually gives Harry the gillyweed. Sorry, Neville. He warns Harry that Umbridge is coming to disrupt the DA, and he tells Draco, giving Harry valuable intel. All of those things are helpful. None of them save his life. The gillyweed is the closest, though, given what we know from the first child. Failing at the second task in the Triwizard Tournament can cause death by embarrassment. Oh no, I'm sorry, I actually misread it. It's turning into a Death Eater out of embarrassment. It's weird. It's winning the third task that kills you. Or who knows, maybe he was embarrassed he tied. You almost know that's how Amos felt.
This is my boy!
Embarrassed me in front of everyone! Oh, that'd be a horrible reaction.
But I don't talk about that.
But when Dobby arrives at Malfoy Manor, he says it himself.
Dobby's come to rescue Harry Potter, of course.
The proof is in the pudding. Dobby creates his own magical contracts, made a promise to Harry, and even in saving Harry's life, costs him his own.
Dobby's happy to be with his friend, Harry Potter.
Okay, so do I fully subscribe to this? It's almost not even the point, but there is value that even Dobby's death aids Harry in his ultimate quest. Take this passage. He dug with a kind of fury, relishing the manual work, glorying in the non-magic of it, for every drop of his sweat and every blister felt like a gift to the elf who had saved their lives. Grief, it seemed, drove Voldemort out, though Dumbledore, of course, would have said that it was love. So even if Dobby's own commitment to his word with Harry somehow was in play, it still contributed to Voldemort's ultimate destruction in more ways than one. I mean, just you consider this, for example, if he speaks ill of the Malfoys at all, people he hates, by the way, he has to physically punish himself. In this particular case, he is breaking a promise to someone he loves. No matter what, this whole idea is thanks. I hate it. Y'all, thank you so much as always for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to like it and subscribe so you don't miss any future Harry Potter action from us. If you'd like to know the inspiration behind this particular idea, we do a concept called Theories Out of a Hat, where we take bad theories and try to support them at all costs. This is one of those theories, and we were like, wait a second, there might actually be something to this. But if you'd like to see the entire episode, you can do so right over here. Otherwise, until next time, don't forget, ducks go in cups.
Aren't you put a rubber duck in a goblet of fire?
Most developed countries in the world today have some form of progressive taxation on earnings. The more money you make, the more money you pay in taxes, both nominally and proportionally through higher tax brackets. Even here in America, the top 1% in recent years has paid more than 40% of all federal income tax. Although that is likely to change after this year's One Big Beautiful Bill significantly readjusted tax rates. Before that though, it may surprise you to learn that over the last 4 decades, the share of income taxes paid by the highest earners has actually been increasing according to select data from the IRS. That's the story anyway. But there has always been one exception: billionaires. According to recent data, the average billionaire is now paying a lower rate of tax than even the bottom 10% of households. And the good news for us here in America is that this trend is actually significantly worse in other European countries. The reason why these statistics can even be mathematically possible at the same time is because there is a big difference between the top 1% and the top 1% of income earners. The former are extremely adept to using the tax systems in good old-fashioned fear-mongering, while the latter are primarily the people actually adding real value to the economy. So why is it so hard to actually tax the ultra-wealthy? And what could go wrong if we did it anyway?
Our economy's growing, our population's growing. Why? Because of the energy and daring of entrepreneurs that are growing and dominating in the industries of the future.
Well, a billionaire's backlash is brewing in California over a proposed bill that would tax the ultra-rich. Some are really ready to keep their businesses and their money above the president of Florida.
So major corporations, financial firms, and also people continue to relocate their headquarters or operations from high-tax states like California and New York.
If I hightail down to Florida and buy a mansion down there, leaving me home a mansion in New York City worth $5 million, that mansion that stays in New York, that's going to be taxed. Is that right?
Pretty right.
Anytime the idea of effective taxation is being discussed, there is one counter-argument that comes up more often than any other.
A record number of millionaires are expected to relocate internationally this year.
800,000 New Yorkers are prepared to leave the city.
An estimated 16,500 very rich people will leave this country this year.
Yeah, that's right. If we try to tax rich people, they are just going to leave, taking with them their money, their jobs, and their businesses. Ironically, if all the rich people leave, then we won't even get the taxes they were paying, which means that by trying to increase revenue, we might actually end up shrinking it. Capital flight or tax flight has become a massive focus around the world once again, particularly in the UK and now in the newly formed Socialist People's Republic of New York City, because they are at risk of losing the very individuals that shaped their economies into what they are today. Headlines have been flooded with high-profile people either leaving or threatening to leave these places and go somewhere more accommodating like Miami, Dubai, Singapore, or Switzerland. But the question is, would that actually be such a bad thing?
You can't decide whether to leave the state or the country.
Trying to move on and leave the state of California permanently, then we're going to go to Florida.
Making a big move. He's heading to Miami, or at least he's been there for quite some time, and it comes with an added bonus: no state income tax.
Now we're talking about Elon Musk moving from California to Texas. I'm leaving.
There's a theoretical concept in economics about the relationship between tax rates and actual tax revenue. If tax rates are very low, then naturally tax revenue will also be low because not many people are willingly going to send a check to the government. As rates increase, so does revenue, but only up to a point. Eventually, if you raise taxes any higher, it will actually result in lower overall revenue, because business activity is disincentivized, or yes indeed, because people will move to somewhere else with lower taxes. Plotting out this relationship gives you what economists call the Laffer Curve, named after Arthur Laffer, who popularized the idea during, well, you guessed it, the Reagan administration. Now, the idea itself is not inherently wrong, but it requires a lot of nuance, and without that, it's often used in really dumb ways to justify equally dumb fiscal policy. The first problem is mistaking exactly where on the graph most places exist. Pundits for lower taxes will say that we are on this side of the graph, which means that if only we lowered rates, it will stimulate more economic activity and actually result in higher total revenue, which can be used to fund government programs or pay down debt. It's a neat idea that you have probably heard a lot before, but it's not really backed up by most data. A 2017 study conducted on 27 OECD countries found that almost all of them were unsurprisingly on this side of the graph, where raising rates on top earners would simultaneously raise tax revenue. Out of all of the countries in the study, the biggest gap between the actual tax rate and revenue maximizing tax rate was in Mexico, Slovakia, and the United States. Now, the reason why this gap was so big was more than just simply the fact that we don't tax as much as most of our European counterparts, but we will get to that soon. For now, despite what you may have been told, the analysis overwhelmingly suggests that we are indeed on this side of the curve. Now, in the interest of fairness, the second mistake that people make by trying to read these lines is assuming that the one and only goal of tax policy is to milk the maximum possible amount of money out of people. The revenue maximizing tax rate and the optimum tax rate are not always the same thing. Lowering rates can be a good way to give average households a budgetary reprieve, or higher taxes can be used on vices to try to stem their use. But the biggest mistake of all is the assumption that most rich people choose their home by sorting low to high on a global tax database, and they are ready to jump ship the second the bill arrives. The reality is a lot more nuanced than that, to put it generously. The 2024 Global Wealth Report by UBS found that European countries with higher tax rates generally had a higher rate of wealth growth over the last 15 years, even after including high net worth immigration. Globally, the countries with the highest median wealth per capita all generally had very high and progressive rates of taxation on income and consumption. Closer to home, people have been threatening to leave places like New York for decades now. And yet, even after adjusting for inflation, their millionaire populations are higher than they have ever been before.
New Yorkers are going to flee. They're going to flee New York because of Bill Mamdani.
To my liberal friends who keep saying, well, tax rates don't matter, then why is it thought that underneath living in New York...
Don't you see what's happening even in New York City? They're running out of money. Why? Because the rich people are moving.
New York's population of millionaire earners, that has nearly doubled. Since 2010, there are 34,000 New Yorkers making at least $1 million or more.
New York City is not even a particularly difficult place to not live in for tax purposes, because if you really wanted to, you could go and live in New Jersey and commute in every day. If you are particularly wealthy, you could do what a lot of hedge fund billionaires do and live in Miami and make sure not to spend more than 182 days a year in your New York holiday home. Extreme examples like this do happen, and they get a lot of attention from everybody when they do, because one side of the debate uses it to highlight how ultra-wealthy people dodge and skirt around laws so we should tax them more effectively, and the other side uses it to highlight how ultra-wealthy people dodge and skirt around laws so we shouldn't bother trying at all. But for all of the attention they get, they are rare. And overwhelmingly for most wealthy people, the business opportunities available in New York against the inconvenience and cost of commuting just make it worth paying the slightly higher taxes. Now, that would be the end of that, if only it wasn't for the curious cases of California and the United Kingdom. So it's time to learn how money works to find out if a mass exodus of rich people is actually a problem. This video is sponsored by Storyblocks. We use a lot of footage in our videos, and if you've ever bought stock clips individually, you know how expensive that can get. That's where Storyblocks comes in. It gives us unlimited downloads of high-quality, human-made stock video, music, sound effects, and templates, all for one predictable subscription cost. Whether you need cinematic B-roll, motion graphics, or the perfect background track, Storyblocks has everything in one place, making our workflow faster and more affordable. Plus, everything is royalty-free with clear-cut licensing, so we never have to worry about copyright claims. You can even whitelist your YouTube channel directly in your account to help prevent music claims, which is a feature exclusive to Storyblocks. If you want to start making videos like ours and build your own business, a Storyblocks subscription is the perfect place to start. To start telling better stories with the tools I use, head to storyblocks.com/howmoneyworksuncut or click the link in the description. They're offering 15% off any annual plan for a limited time, and that discount is only available through my link. Okay, so it wouldn't be fair to talk about rich people fleeing without talking about the UK. According to some estimates, the UK lost almost 10,000 high net worth individuals in the last calendar year to net outward migration. Now, some people have highlighted some structural problems with the Henley & Partners report on which this is based, and we will get into that. But overall, their methodology is at least somewhat consistent over time, and it does draw on expertise and collaboration from a wide range of industry professionals and global bodies. The point is, it shows that the UK was once a magnet for global wealth as people were attracted to its accommodating financial center and high-end amenities that catered almost exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. But over time, the country, and in particular the City of London, saw that these wealthy people were causing some problems. I made a video about this just 3 months ago, so I am not going to give you the whole spiel. But the cliff notes are, they drove up home prices, they turned the financial system into a laundry machine, and they didn't actually contribute that much to the economy relative to the concessions that were made to attract them. Yeah, sure. Some global billionaires hired a lot of maids and service staff, but the average Brit probably wouldn't consider being a butler to Boris war crime ski an ideal economic outcome. Now, to be fair, there were higher skilled roles like financial services that developed around these wealthy individuals as well, but a 2022 paper found that a majority of this work was done offshore anyway, providing questionable benefits to the country. As policies were introduced to curtail money laundering and actually get something out of all the wealth that was being parked in London, these wealthy individuals did indeed start leaving. The exact numbers are up for debate, but wealthy people are moving out, primarily to places like Dubai that are becoming what London was 10 years ago. A low-tax money laundry with some Gucci stores stapled on. So yeah, millionaire exoduses do happen, but London is more of the exception that proves the rule. When a country was filled up to begin with by people just looking for the best deal for them and their money, then of course those are the same kind of people to move on just as quickly when a better deal becomes available. Competing in a race to the bottom to be the lowest bidder for a few thousand wealthy individuals looking to pay back as little as possible is a losing proposition. Even if you win, your prize is a collection of people with no local attachment who by definition don't want to contribute. But even while all of this was happening, the number of millionaires in the UK actually increased. This homegrown wealth is also much less likely to leave because, well, it's their home. Most people, even those with extremely high incomes, aren't going to leave their home cities, social networks, families, customs, and way of life over some tax savings, and that's assuming that they even could. On a small scale, we saw this play out over the last 5 years between California and Texas. Moving between states is easier than moving between countries. This enabled a lot of remote workers and entire businesses to shift from expensive, high-tax cities in California to more business-friendly, cheaper, and lower-tax states like Texas. But as people were forced back into offices and the AI bubble started blowing back towards a proven tech hub, places like Austin are facing serious shocks in their housing market, which had boomed on the expectation that these temperamental tech workers would keep on coming forever. The channel Upton did a great on-the-ground video on this a few months ago, so I will leave a link to that in the description. A lot of wealth in an area is tied to that area itself, and even more comes from its institutions. In that 2017 study on the Laffer Curve, America had the highest revenue maximizing tax rate out of all OECD countries because we have so many domestic industries that generate enormous fortunes. A wealthy American could renounce their citizenship and move overseas for lower taxes or more accommodating regulations. But almost nobody does it, because having unfettered access to Silicon Valley, Wall Street, American real estate, or a financial system is worth more to most wealthy people than some tax savings. The study's method found that we could set top marginal tax rates as high as 76%, and most people would just have to suck it up and pay it, because leaving would have a higher opportunity cost. This study wasn't suggesting that we should do that, but it was suggesting that the idea that raising taxes would lower revenue wasn't grounded in reality. Now, even with all this, it's important to acknowledge that as people get wealthier, setting up a life in a new country and moving wealth around the globe does become easier. These people are also naturally more high profile than your average run-of-the-mill high net worth individual, so they do get more attention. But in terms of general economic activity, job creation, and entrepreneurship, it's much better to have 1,000 extra millionaires than one single billionaire. And this is what we have overwhelmingly seen in major centers where the wealth exodus is getting the most attention. There is a chart that really puts this whole discussion into perspective, because it highlights just how much of a big deal wealthy people threatening to leave their home country really is. It's right here. This is the total migration rate of dollar millionaires amongst all of the countries seeing the biggest outflows. And no, this isn't me screwing up my graphs again. The report that compiled these numbers generously said that reported numbers of millionaires migrating in 2024 represented approximately 0% of millionaires at global and national levels. The UBS Global Wealth Data Book estimates that there are about 60 million millionaires in the world today. A few thousand of them finding a new home is not statistically significant. This is also including wealthy people that just happen to move to countries for reasons other than saving on tax, like avoiding conflicts, political instability, or just moving to a nice place for retirement. But alright, let's say for the sake of argument that there was some kind of change that actually did scare away a lot of wealthy people. Would that actually be a problem? Well, yes. And places like South Africa, Lebanon, Venezuela, and Russia have over several years seen this kind of capital flight. But it wasn't wealthy people leaving that destabilized these countries. It was the instability that caused the wealthy people to leave. Even if we ignore correlation and causation for a second, several studies, including some from Nobel Prize winners, have been done on the impact of these people immigrating. What they have found is that overwhelmingly, the biggest loss is the expertise of skilled workers rather than the money of a few wealthy investors. Losing a handful of doctors, engineers, lawyers, and institutional managers hurts a lot more than losing some cash. Money can be printed, and infrastructure can't be taken away in a suitcase, but human capital is both mobile and very hard to replace. Under normal circumstances, these people are far less likely to move away from their home, since qualifications like medical degrees are not always transferable. So yes, this could be a problem if your definition of wealthy person includes high-end skilled professionals rather than just exclusively independently wealthy asset owners. Fortunately, the best way to get these people to stick around is to just make sure that institutions are well run and that people feel comfortable in their homes. So most rich people aren't leaving, but that doesn't mean that they are paying as much as the top line numbers would have you think. The actual business of avoiding tax is very real, very creative, and somehow very legal. Last year, ProPublica, a non-profit investigative journalism organization, leaked a cache of IRS files that contained tax information about the richest people in America. Dozens of journalists and forensic accountants were able to reverse engineer a number of systems that billionaires use to pay much lower rates of income tax than most regular working Americans. Some were so good at working their numbers that they paid no income tax at all, and some billionaire accountants were even good enough to get their wealthy clients classified as low or middle income earners so they didn't miss out on a stimulus check. ProPublica went on to publish 10 of the biggest and most morally questionable loopholes that the IRS files revealed. You probably won't be shocked to learn that most of these loopholes aren't possible for us regular people to take advantage of, but a few of them are. Of the 10 that ProPublica has published, 5 are genuine problems with the tax code that really do justify some policy reviews. 3 are just good business practices that everybody should be doing, and 2 are really just filler that the website needed to get to number 10 because it made for a catchier headline. Capital gains are the taxes that you pay when you sell an asset or equity for profit. If you buy a share for $10 and sell it for $100, you will pay a capital gains tax on the $90 in profit you just made. Capital gains taxes are very important to rich people because their fortunes overwhelmingly come from their investments, not from their regular jobs.
Income
tax, state tax, inheritance tax, capital gains tax.
In fact, up until his retirement as Amazon CEO, Jeff Bezos only received an $80,000 a year salary for his work. Most of his money and most of the money of other billionaires comes from the appreciation in the value of the assets they own. The problem comes when they need money. They are still people after all, and they need to buy food, clothes, homes, and fuel for their private jets. You know, the essentials. The simple way for them to get this cash would be for them to sell some of their assets. This is especially easy when their assets are liquid, like shares in a public company. If they do this though, they will have to pay capital gains taxes if the assets they are selling are worth more than what they were purchased, and hopefully, if the billionaire is making good investments, this will be the case. If the billionaire wants to avoid this, they can work out just how much they want to live off of for the year and they take out a loan. They don't pay tax on cash they receive as a loan, and if they put up collateral like the shares that they were thinking of selling, then they will pay a very low interest rate. As an added benefit, if the assets appreciate at a higher rate than the interest rate on the loan, they will actually be better off than before, even considering the tax advantages of this hilariously named buy, borrow, die tax strategy. Unfortunately, the loans that the billionaires use to make this work are only available to the type of people that have the department at the bank dedicated just to them.
Under what circumstances would you be obligated to cooperate with an FBI or U.S. Justice Department investigation, for example?
Ça dépend.
Ça dépend.
Wait. The closest thing that regular people will get to this is a home equity line of credit, which in many ways is just a small-scale version of the same strategy. On the topic of real estate, it is the centerpiece of many billionaires' portfolios, not in small part thanks to the amazing range of tax breaks available in this industry. The government wants people to invest in homes, so it has tax policies to encourage investors to give people a place to live. Similar tax breaks are available to oil drilling and farming. It's a good bet that anything that the government views as an essential industry probably has some favorable tax policies written to sweeten the deal for billionaires putting their money there. One of the biggest allowances made to investors, specifically in real estate, is a 1031 exchange. This is a tax rule that lets investors sell investment properties for a profit and not pay capital gains tax on it, so long as they use that profit to buy more investment properties within a certain time period. This has let property moguls flip their way to enormous property empires without paying a cent in tax along the way. To make this better for them, they can subtract the depreciation of their buildings from the rental income they make, which means with some clever accounting, they can have millions of dollars in cash coming in completely tax-free. If you think property moguls are bad, they have nothing on the owners of sports teams. These guys are the absolute kings of profiting off something that no policymaker would be brave enough to campaign against. Nope. Americans love their sports, and it's a huge industry that makes team owners a lot of money. Voters want to keep their teams, which means cunning team owners can effectively ransom city governments into paying for lavish stadiums for their teams under the guise of being a community center. But the grift goes much further than that. Sports teams are considered a depreciating asset, which means even if they are making a lot of money and actually increasing in value, the owner can claim a portion of what they paid for the team as a tax deduction in the years following their purchase. As if that wasn't good enough, player contracts are often set up in such a way that they are effectively considered a piece of equipment, not unlike a delivery truck or a fax machine. That means that the players too can be counted as depreciating assets, which, despite feeling icky in principle, can sometimes mean that sports team owners can claim depreciation twice on the same investment.
It's a real business. It's not, what's the right word? It's not a trophy asset like it used to be. It has to make money.
One of the smartest things a billionaire can do to avoid taxes is to die. The United States does have inheritance taxes, but there are so many loopholes in it that it's basically not worth talking about. Spouses, for instance, don't pay any inheritance tax on assets that are left to them by their late husband or wife. This is actually a good policy, because nobody wants a widow to have to sell her family home to pay an estate tax. But the IRS files have again shown that some billionaires take this generosity to the extreme. There is a tax rule called the stepped-up basis. What this rule does is that when someone dies and passes their assets to an inheritor, the capital gains gets counted from what the asset was worth at the time of the person's death. For example, say a billionaire made their fortune by investing in Apple in the early 80s. If they sold their shares today, they would have to pay capital gains on almost all the shares' value because it had appreciated so much. Instead, if they simply die, they can leave their shares to their partner or their children, and now the capital gains will be calculated at Apple's current valuation. If the inheritors then sold the shares immediately, they would pay no capital gains taxes at all, saving them millions. But for some billionaires, this is still not good enough. One billionaire, who will remain nameless because I don't want to get sued, inherited an oil company from her late husband in the early 2000s. She then did something you don't see rich people doing often. She told the IRS that the company was worth more than it really was. She did this because within reason, the IRS will agree to the value of a private company, because without being listed on a public market, it is really hard to find out what a company is actually worth. Once the IRS agreed that the company was worth $1.6 billion, she would later go on to sell it for $1.2 billion. Since capital gains were calculated based off the $1.6 billion figure her accountants provided to the IRS, this looked like a $400 million capital loss. Not only did this mean that she paid no taxes, it also meant that she was able to use this made-up loss to offset the income she made from her other investments in the years that followed. I will leave a link to the full story in the video description, because I have not even covered half of it here. It really is a wild ride. We all have to play by the tax rules, but those rules were written for the rich. If there isn't some loophole or scheme that will let a rich person avoid tax or claim an income so low that they actually get government subsidies, then they still have one trick left up their sleeves. They just use their money to lobby the government to introduce new tax laws which will let them get away with paying less. A $50,000 campaign contribution is a great investment if it gets a tax bill passed that saves them millions. A common theme amongst all of these tax loopholes is that they take advantage of systems that were designed to do good. We love sports, and the joy that they bring communities should be supported. We should be building more houses by encouraging investment in them. We shouldn't make people homeless because they need to pay a tax on their husband or wife's estate, and it's not fair to tax people for taking out a loan. These rules are the same for everyone, but they are designed for the majority, not a tiny handful of people that can make sure that these reasonable laws are written in such a way that they can reap some pretty unreasonable benefits from them. And the thing is that none of this is a bug, it's a feature. The complication of the tax code is what makes it possible to use some pretty sophisticated loopholes. The federal tax code, when written out from beginning to end, is about 2,600 pages long. Depending on who you ask, it can be as long as 70,000 pages if you include all the relevant legal rulings on the contents of the code itself. This snowballing complexity would be a big enough headache by itself. But the biggest problem of all is that the federal government only collects about a dozen different taxes. The guidelines on what these taxes are, how they are calculated, and how they are collected takes up a total of about 250 pages. Everything else in the code is allowances, credits, deductions, offsets, incentives, and deferments. And that's just federal taxes. Things become exponentially more complicated when local and state taxes are included as well. Now, it doesn't matter if you believe that all taxes are theft, or if you think that the rich should be taxed out of existence. The current system is broken in just the right way. So it's no secret that tax loopholes benefit the rich. And that's for two reasons. However, most people choose to just focus on one. The first reason is because wealthy people can afford to pay the billable hours of accountants and tax lawyers to set up their personal finances and business structures to take advantage of these loopholes. According to the National Association of Tax Professionals, the average cost to prepare an individual return in America in 2023 was $248. That's already more expensive than it should be, but tax services go way up from there. Tailored tax services that submit the paperwork required to take advantage of some of these loopholes can cost tens of thousands of dollars every year to put together. That means that it's only worth it for people that can save hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax by diligently structuring their affairs. The second reason that tax loopholes only benefit the rich is because they are the ones that pay tax. According to data from the IRS and compiled by the Tax Foundation, roughly 153 million Americans paid federal income taxes in 2021. That's about half the population. Of those, the top 1% of earners paid almost half of all income taxes. That just mathematically means that anything to offset taxes is going to benefit higher income earners more than people earning less. The Tax Foundation is a think tank that lobbies for lower, flatter taxes, so it does have an agenda with this data, but it's still pulled directly from the IRS, so the numbers don't lie. But the fact that thousands of pages of tax loopholes is good for high-income earners isn't actually the problem. Hot take alert, but let me explain. On this income chart, where would you place Jeff Bezos? Probably the top 1%, right? He is, after all, one of the richest men in the world. But depending on the year, he has actually spent just as much time down here. According to tax document leaks published by ProPublica, in 2011, Jeff Bezos legally reported an income so low that he actually qualified for and claimed a $4,000 tax credit for his children. The people who actually make up most of the 1% of highest income earners are more often highly skilled professionals like doctors, lawyers, and tech workers who still get a regular W-2 paycheck or draw a salary from their small business but can't defer their income to when it's convenient for them and their team of accountants. But while criticizing a system that counts a man like this as low income and in need of family assistance is fun and easy, it distracts from three other more serious problems with the overcomplication of the tax code. The first major problem is that it lifts up some businesses while pushing down others. One of the reasons why homes have become so unaffordable is because they are treated like a financial asset as much as they are like a place for people to live their lives. Homes have several advantages over other financial assets that make them particularly attractive to investors of all sizes, from small-time landlords with a single rental property all the way to the largest investment firms on the planet. If you want to invest into real estate, you can get cheap leverage through a mortgage that won't be margin called like a loan to buy other financial assets. Real estate also cash flows well, so in the right markets, your rental income could cover your mortgage repayments. But as if real estate needed a sweetener, there is also an extensive list of tax benefits available to real estate investors. For example, a 1031 exchange lets a real estate investor sell their property for a profit and not pay any capital gains taxes as long as they use the money to buy one or more other properties of equal or greater value within 180 days. This means real estate is one of the few investment vehicles where you can trade up a portfolio while deferring taxes indefinitely. Or put another way, incentives for hoarding real estate are literally written into the tax code. Just this incentive is so common that it's become its own verb amongst savvy property investors. They will 1031 a property, which means they will trade it up for bigger property or more properties while saving on the tax. Real estate has so many tax incentives that the Federal Office of the Comptroller set up a directory to help people navigate what they are eligible for. The reason these incentives exist is because at one point in time, the government thought it would be a good idea to encourage property investment. The 1031 exchange dates back over 100 years to 1921, when it was first introduced. Back then, real estate investing was very different from today. The good news is that America isn't the worst example of this. Canada, China, New Zealand, and especially Australia have even more generous tax incentives for real estate, so perhaps it's unsurprising that their housing is even less affordable. But in America, it's not just real estate. The property market may be one of the most distorted markets for tax incentives, but there are 9,834 sections in the tax code that have all accumulated over decades. It is very easy to pass new tax incentives. It's almost impossible to take them away without getting voted out. Anytime the government wants to incentivize some new type of business, investing, or labor activity, they can create a tax incentive to achieve it, and that's created a landscape where it's just more tax efficient to run your own business, your savings, and your investments in a certain way, even if it comes at the expense of the wider economy. But distorting already highly problematic markets is just the first problem with the loophole arms race. According to a report by ProPublica, someone earning $20,000 a year is now more likely to be audited by the IRS than someone earning over $400,000 a year. This is because the IRS is so underfunded and so understaffed that it can't argue its own tax code as well as the private sector tax lawyers representing wealthy individuals. To maintain its audit numbers, the IRS has resorted to a strategy I like to call sledgehammering blueberries, where they will come down hard on the softest, easiest targets. The Earned Income Tax Credit is another overly complicated tax incentive, but this one is given to low-income households to encourage them to earn their own income instead of relying solely on welfare. This is a great idea, But the problem is the instructions for claiming this credit are 41 pages of very dense financial and legal jargon. Michelle Lyon-Drumble, a tax professor at Washington and Lee School of Law, reported in an interview with ProPublica that even her third-year law students couldn't understand these IRS guidelines. So what hope does an untrained worker making a minimum wage have? The incentive to audit low-income workers trying to get a basic credit sounds bad, but it's just one symptom of the second problem with an overly complex tax system. Filing taxes is expensive, stressful, and time-consuming. You need to play a game with the IRS where you both think of a number, and if they don't match, you get hit with an even more stressful and time-consuming audit. This means that almost everybody filing a tax return needs to pay for the service of a professional tax accountant, even if they have really simple finances. I was a financial professional for about half a decade, and even I wouldn't dare do my taxes without an accountant. Every year, Americans spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to work out how much they have to give Uncle Sam. But it doesn't have to be like this. Most other advanced countries don't have this system. Most other tax agencies tell their citizens how much they owe from their tax withholdings from their paycheck. From this number, you can still claim deductions as they are allowed, but the system is simple and user-friendly enough that most people can prepare and lodge accurate returns for themselves in under an hour. America has been trying to make simple tax returns a thing from as far back as Reagan, who promised a return-free system like these other countries. But today, according to a report by the IRS themselves, Americans spend a collective 2 billion hours preparing personal tax returns. If those man hours were spent on working something productive at the average national rate, it would be over $220 billion in additional economic output. Or put another way, approximately the GDP of Hungary is wasted on doing taxes every year. There are two reasons that we still have this system, despite politicians from both sides of the aisle pushing the easy alternative. The first reason is intense political lobbying from tax preparation companies that profit off this inefficiency. According to Open Secrets and regulatory filings, TurboTax's parent company Intuit spent a record $3.8 million on federal lobbying in 2023 alone. That's just one tax preparation company in 1 year, so it's safe to say that the political will to fix the system has been eroded. The second reason you have to play the guessing game with the IRS every year is that our tax code is simply too complicated to make a return-free system work for most people like it does in most other advanced economies. And that's the third major problem with the tax loophole arms race. It makes people hate taxes. You probably hate taxes, but how much of that is because you hate actually giving your money to Uncle Sam, and how much of that is because you hate the stress and time that goes into them? Making taxes suck is a very good way to make people vote for a system that sounds more simple, even if it's not in their financial best interest. Here's a question for you. Why are long-term capital gains taxed at a lower rate than the income tax for high earners? The top federal tax rate for people working for an income is 37% before state income taxes and FICA, but the long-term capital gains tax rate is a maximum of 20%, with the vast majority of people paying just 15%. So why do people who work for their money pay more in taxes than people who sit on appreciating assets? There are two technical answers and one real answer. The first technical reason that is often used to explain this disparity is that inflation makes things more expensive over time, even if their real value hasn't improved. If you buy a house for $100,000 and then 20 years later sell it for $200,000, you would have $100,000 in capital gains. But if inflation had the purchasing power of the dollar in that time, then even though you have made no real gain, you would still owe $15,000 in capital gains taxes. The argument is that a lower capital gains tax is only fair to offset this kind of thing. The second argument was first put forth by Tony Atkinson and Joseph Stiglitz in a paper titled The Design of Tax Structure, where they said that taxes on investment profits were unnecessary because the money to buy assets comes from labor income anyway, so taxing those assets is unnecessary double taxation. Even Stiglitz himself later admitted that this thinking was flawed, because there are other ways to obtain assets other than working for them. But people were still very happy to promote these ideas because it justified the real reason that taxes have remained so favorable, and that's because capital gains income is really what most of the world's richest people actually live on. Tax reform is very hard when the only people that have the time and expertise to understand it are the ones benefiting from the current broken system. So if you can't fix the tax code, what do you do with all of that money? Well, if you're a billionaire, you give it away. Sort of. Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan announced a major shakeup to their pledge goal of donating 99% of their Facebook shares within their lifetime to their foundation. This made a lot of people very angry, and was widely considered a bad move. The focus of the controversy was the fact that the business leaders would be moving their foundation attention away from social issues and towards, in their own words, going all in on AI-powered biology for our next chapter. So, yeah. A man whose company is going all in on AI investment and has said he really wants to live forever is channeling his charitable work almost exclusively towards AI that will help people live forever. Now, people can and should be able to put their money towards whatever they think is important. But of course, the problem here is that this little pet project is going to have questionable real-world benefits for most people while simultaneously emitting serious tax revenue. Now, despite the unflattering headlines and understandable backlash, the Zuck is actually far from the worst offender in this little game. Large tax-deductible donations have been used to dictate the direction of scientific research, launder reputations, and ironically, be used to shape public policy further away from the idea of just taxing these people instead. On top of this, there is a new type of quasi-venture charity that is quietly becoming much more popular amongst some of the richest people in the world. There are a few examples that honestly need to be getting a lot more attention than they are. Just look at something like OpenAI. Remember when it was supposed to be a nonprofit dedicated to the good of humanity? Whatever happened to that, you might wonder? Well, it may end up being the guinea pig for a lot of new technologies to follow the same path. The spending, regulatory hurdles, and public pushback has gotten to a point where it raises the question: at what point would it be easier and cheaper to just pay the damn taxes? Now, I want to start off this video by saying that I have read your comments, and I know that you all say I can be a bit of a Grinch. Now, in my defense, one of the most important parts of critical analysis is being critical. But you're right, I could be a bit more positive about things. So I promised in this video about how modern charitable giving has become a blight on real societal progress. There actually will be a lot of positive takeaways. But before that, we need to address three major problems with our record generosity. According to aggregated data from Giving USA, total charitable contributions to 501c nonprofits and charitable institutions reached $593 billion in 2024. We don't yet have the data from 2025, but the trend is clearly upwards. In a vacuum, this is clearly a good thing. Not only does giving to charity help social issues that may not be addressed by government spending, it also increases civic mindedness, and there is one other positive that comes out of this all as well. If people are finding money to give to charity, it's normally a pretty good indication that their own financial lives are stable enough to lose a few dollars here and there without putting themselves in serious distress. Today, the first problem has come from the fact that the concentration of charitable giving has somehow outpaced even regular wealth inequality. Accounting for inflation, in 1993, households that earn less than $200,000 a year made up 77% of all charitable giving. Extremely wealthy households making over $1 million a year contributed just 10% to the total pot. By 2019, the average household share had halved to just 33%, and contributions from those on over $1 million had more than quadrupled, all within the span of just 26 years. I also say average households, like people bringing home $200,000 a year, are not doing better than most, but this is what the researchers used. One last thing is that, yes, this data only goes up to 2019, because this information is notoriously hard to produce, but more on that later. Anyway, for now, the point is that charities have increasingly become extremely dependent on a very small pool of donors and their own discretion. In fact, the vast majority of large charitable contributions are made to foundations that the wealthy donors themselves control. The problem this creates was made very clear when the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative last refocused their efforts. When they stopped funding social causes to reshift their focus towards science, a school that was exclusively reliant on them closed down overnight, displacing 400 underprivileged students. In a press release, it was announced that the school was closing down due to a lack of funding, without pointing to the logical irony that they were the funding. In cases like this, it is important to remember that a large chunk of projects like that school were still indirectly funded with taxpayer dollars, not directly through government budgets, but rather indirectly through emitted revenue. If a school for underprivileged children truly was necessary, just taking a portion of the tax concessions given to something like Zuckerberg's Institute could publicly fund it and remove the possibility that it gets closed down overnight because the tastes of two people change. It sounds bad, but again, comparatively, while it makes it really easy to dislike him, Zuckerberg is still far from the worst offender in this game. It gets much, much worse. The organizational structure that Zuckerberg uses for his charitable giving isn't actually officially a foundation at all. Now that means that the tax concessions are not as immediate as more typical charitable family foundations, but getting rid of this status has given them a lot more flexibility. They still control the shares they donate. They don't need to disclose their executives, they can invest and receive returns, and they can make direct political donations. Now, credit where credit is due. They are a lot more transparent than they need to be, given that this is effectively just a private company. But they are also setting a blueprint for what less public-facing billionaires could do with similar initiatives. And at the end of it all, it's not like they are giving up their tax deductions. Okay, so even if it was only around for 9 years and then unceremoniously shut down overnight, you could still make the argument that a school for underprivileged children in an expensive area like Palo Alto did some good for society while it was operating with no glaring conflicts of interest. But who really benefits off other forms of charitable giving is a little less clear. At least it could be argued that Zuckerberg is just shifting his money around to whatever is trending at the time. 10 years ago, it was DEI and serving underprivileged communities, and today, it's AI vaporware. But there are other groups that are a lot more deliberate with their giving. The second major problem is that these contributions are often used to win over more than just hearts and minds, and the IRS. They are often explicitly pushing a questionable or just unpopular agenda. The Waltons of the Walmart family fortune have actually committed to their school funding for more than 9 years, but at the same time, their contributions are being used to fund policy debates around charter schools versus traditional public schooling. Other contributions are even more direct than that. Ideological think tanks across the political spectrum, like the Heritage Foundation, Brookings Institute, and the Center for American Progress, also take in millions of dollars every year in deductible contributions. Even when the agenda is not so transparent, the true benefits are often equally unclear. If you spend enough time going around between concert halls, prestigious schools, or museums, you are going to see lots of different family names on lots of different buildings. Now, this is clearly a case where your own personal opinions could be different than someone else's. But as charitable giving has become more concentrated amongst very wealthy people, a lot more of the spending is going towards projects and infrastructure that will overwhelmingly be enjoyed by other wealthy people. Ballet theaters, curated art galleries, and endowments for high-end schools are all nice things to have. But there are, arguably, things that average people need more immediately right now. A famous, or perhaps now infamous, example of this is Harvard's enormous endowment that is used to fund buildings, research, and scholarships. Donations to this endowment are generally tax deductible, but there is an argument to be made that people attending Harvard generally no longer need a leg up, and their existing scholarships could easily be funded through their existing $57 billion if they really wanted to. Again, the value of these investments is a matter of personal opinion, and even most of you watching still thought that donations should be tax deductible. But if they are, it's important to remember that a tax break is effectively the same as a tax incentive. And if you wouldn't personally support taxpayer money being prioritized towards these projects, that is effectively the same problem. Something like Zuckerberg's shift into AI-powered health research would also arguably fall into this category. A lot of great health outcomes could be achieved right now by just funding simple healthcare for people who can't afford it. Highly advanced medical treatments to extend human lifetimes are clearly something that are of interest to wealthy people directly. The true public benefit of these donations versus the lost public benefit of the tax revenue is even more questionable when it comes to gifted assets. One of the most popular charitable categories amongst wealthy philanthropists is supporting the arts. But the value of art is famously a subjective gift. There have been a few great videos made here on YouTube about the sneaky tricks that it enables, and I will leave a link to them below. But the simple rundown is that you buy a painting for $10,000, wait a few years, and feature that artwork around some of the galleries you support, and have that painting revalued later for millions of dollars and then donate it at that value to one of these foundations. You just bought yourself $1 million tax deduction for 10,000 real dollars. Now, maybe you still think, if some rich guy wants to stick his name on a building that's open to the public, or some elite students, or put their weird artwork in a gallery, just let them. The reality is that a lot of these people pay ridiculously low tax rates anyway, so the deductions were never the primary motivation in the first place. But it gets worse. OpenAI was initially founded as a nonprofit organization with the stated goal of researching artificial intelligence for the benefit of humanity. The donations made to start the organization's early research were tax deductible, as they were with every designated nonprofit. Now, the OpenAI nonprofit still exists as a minority 26% owner of the for-profit subsidiary within this complex corporate structure. But the scope and goals of OpenAI have clearly changed as it ramps up for a predicted IPO. And the group's CEO speaks very openly about the value he is bringing to his shareholders.
how can a company with 13 billion in revenues make 1.4 trillion of spend commitments? You know, and you've heard the criticism, Sam.
We're doing well more revenue than that. Second of all, Brad, if you want to sell your shares, I'll find you a buyer. I just, enough. Like, you know, people are. I think there's a lot of people who would love to buy OpenAI shares. I don't think you.
Including myself. Including myself.
Who talk with a lot of like breathless concern about our compute stuff or whatever, that would be thrilled to buy shares. So I think we could sell, you know, your shares or anybody else's to some of the people who are making the most noise on Twitter, whatever.
Other big foundations have clearly seen this lesson play out, and they have learned a lot from it. You can charitably give money to research some amazing new technology. And well, if it doesn't work out, you can talk about your philanthropic contributions to cutting-edge research and enjoy your tax deductions. But if the technology does work, you can shift it into a for-profit company that you maintain significant control over. In such a case, you may retroactively lose your tax deductibility. But if, I don't know, as a random example, you just happen to fund AI research to massively slow down aging, well, a few $1 million in tax refunds would be meaningless compared to the potential market value of this technology. This has the potential to reshape long-shot venture capital to make it a game of, if it wins, the investors win, and if it fails, the philanthropists still get their pre-tax deductions on their seed round invested capital. Now, technically, this is illegal. To qualify for tax deductibility, the donor cannot get any tangible benefit from their donation, but clearly there are ways around these rules. If a highly valuable new technology is developed, it can just be licensed out to a separate organization with no nonprofit restrictions. This business move is already becoming very popular with companies looking to skirt around antitrust regulation. Instead of directly gaining ownership of the target organization through a share buyout, be it a competitor or a nonprofit research organization, the investors will just hire all of the talent from them and then pay a big licensing fee to use their IP. Analysts have dubbed this move the Halo acquisition, or hiring and licensing out, which is allowing mostly large tech companies to buy potential competitors without officially having to acquire their business. In a case where a nonprofit develops an equally marketable technology, their in-house talent could just be hired across and the research license out. Now, effective regulators are supposed to step in and challenge these schemes before they become present. But, well, that's probably not going to happen. And the thing is that a lot of the people running these charity scams, well, we have absolutely no idea who they are. According to Forbes, America has 735 billionaires worth a combined $4.5 trillion. But how many billionaires are there really? When Forbes publishes their list, they add a small qualifier that almost nobody notices. There are 735 listed billionaires in America, because nobody knows how many there really are. Forbes employs more than 50 employees in 16 countries to compile their list. According to their methodology article, they use public financial records, interviews with employees, rivals, attorneys, and they attempt to validate the numbers by contacting the billionaires directly. Some cooperate and give Forbes access to their personal finances so they can report a more accurate number, but the magazine admits that most don't.
But on the other hand, these billionaires often don't want you to look under the hood, and they're constantly finding clever ways and different ways to shelter their money, move it around, try to hide it, or just coming up with just new tax strategies.
Much of the list is an estimated guess, but there are also a lot of billionaires out there that will never show up on the list even though they should.
The list is really a list of individual billionaires rather than, widespread family fortunes. And the same thing for people asking about Vladimir Putin or things like that. It's hard to break out where money is so intermingled with the government.
One group are the crony government leaders using their country's central bank as their own personal credit card. But I think there is another group that is even more interesting than that. Forbes and Bloomberg, who both get a lot of online attention from their billionaires list, have behind closed doors admitted that they have no way of keeping track of the most common type of American billionaire. In an interview with the New York Times, Kiri Dolan, the editor who oversees the Forbes team responsible for the annual list, gave a profile of a billionaire that they would never be able to find. She told the Times that it's someone who quietly sold a stake in a business for, say, $250 million in the 90s and then invested it well. That's it. That's all there is to it. $250 million is a big exit, especially back in the 90s, but it wouldn't have made the news unless it was a well-known household brand. Most good businesses of this size are boring and only sell their products to other businesses. As a former investment banker who has worked on a lot of these deals personally, I can tell you that $250 million exits happen every day, and sometimes it's not even the founders who are walking away with all of the money. Silent early investors in a private company would only show up on the paperwork in the part that tells the acquirer where to send the money. If a person took all of their earnings from a sale in 1999 at the height of the dot-com bubble and put all of it into the market and then spent a meager $1.2 million a year or $100,000 a month on themselves, they would now be worth $3.3 billion, and nobody would know unless they wanted them to. There are flashy individuals that want to show off their wealth, and there are billionaires that couldn't avoid attention because the companies they founded are too well known. But most billionaires are invisible to everybody but their close family, their accountant, and the IRS. There are three very important reasons why these billionaires do this, and two fascinating strategies they use to make sure they stay under the radar. The first reason that most billionaires try very hard to stay off the Forbes list is because of the problems that come with public notoriety. Lottery winners are routinely harassed by people begging for money, filing frivolous lawsuits, and family members pitching them a business idea over Thanksgiving dinner. The average lottery winner is 7 times more likely to declare bankruptcy than the average American, and the public attention they get is a big reason why. Not only is getting chased for your money annoying and costly, it can be dangerous. Known wealthy people are the logical targets of kidnappings, burglaries, and blackmail. High-profile business leaders and celebrities employ personal security, but it's difficult for these teams to always cover all their family members. Personal security is also expensive and inconvenient, because they need to travel, work, and live with you to remain effective. A nice relaxing life enjoying your riches can quickly turn into another job of managing a security team.
Executive protection agents serving Bollywood's biggest stars can earn more than $300,000 a year.
If nobody knows who you are or what you have in your Schwab account, then all of these problems can be avoided, and that's just the first reason. The second reason that most billionaires try very hard to avoid being included on the Forbes list is because they don't want to be seen alongside the same people that normally get included in the magazine. A lot of people that get articles written about them in Forbes paid for the privilege. Magazine subscriptions are down, and selling online ads doesn't make nearly as much money as selling physical copies did back when it was the most popular way to read these publications. Magazines like Forbes have had to look for alternative revenue sources, and doing paid articles is a lucrative option. People with C-suite career ambitions will get their PR manager to pay the magazine a few $1,000s to write a fluff piece about how they reshaped corporate culture at their last company. For a few $1,000s more, they can be included on a list like the Forbes 30 Under 30. Most of these lists are comprised of people that paid to be there, with a few big names like Sam Bankman-Fried and Martin Shkreli smattered in to give the list some credibility.
It was once an honor to be among Forbes' annual selection of 30 innovative business people under 30 years old. But in recent years, more and more individuals who have appeared on the list have ended up behind bars.
Forbes reports on a lot of people that want attention because they are the easiest people to report on. Business people normally only want attention if it serves them in some way. Linking a Forbes article on your resume and LinkedIn profile could be a good career move and worth the few $1,000s it costs. But for people who are already rich, it looks like they are desperate for attention. There is no way to tell who was written about in Forbes on their own merit, who was written about unwillingly, and who was written about because they paid for it. Established billionaires don't want people to assume it's the latter, so they just avoid media attention altogether. The other group of people that pay magazines like Forbes to write about them are scammers that make their money by selling online courses or cryptocurrency projects. If you watch some of their ads, you will see that they brag about being featured in Forbes or Money magazine, which gives them a lot of credibility, and they can win over some skeptical customers. Most people will think that magazines like this wouldn't play any part in promoting a scam, but they would.
Could it be that the Forbes 30 Under 30 list really just attracts entrepreneurs who really don't have a legitimate business just to land on their list for social proof?
The business people that billionaires work with every day know about this paid publicity, so for them showing up in Forbes is a mark against someone's business case. The third reason that most billionaires avoid publications like Forbes is plain old selection bias. The people getting featured in Forbes magazine are usually at the height of their careers or business success. After that, there is a long way to fall and not a long way left to go up. The people that are heads of major companies or members of high-profile families can't avoid it. But anybody that seeks out attention knows the risks, and does it anyway because they like the attention. People with these character traits will long-term be less likely to manage their wealth and their business effectively. They will be more likely to take large risks and be overly assured in their own business skills. People like Kevin O'Leary would be a lot wealthier today if they had just invested their early career winnings into the market and then did nothing else. Someone's financial success becoming public information can also turn a lot of their customers off their brand. People like to support small family businesses over soulless corporations, but if they find out that the owners are already billionaires, their customers' loyalty will not be as strong. On the expense side, a known billionaire will also be offered more expensive options anywhere they go. They will get overquoted by contractors and get judged for negotiating discounts. There are very few benefits of having one's wealth publicly known, and there are a lot of problems it causes. Smart billionaires understand this, and smart billionaires are more likely to stay billionaires. So you have just become a billionaire and you want to stay completely anonymous. Excellent. I have clearly taught you how money works, so here is what you are going to need to do. If your money is coming out of the sale of a business, make sure it is a private sale. These days, launching your company onto public markets through an IPO is only really necessary if you are going to be the next Facebook or Amazon. And if your company is that big, sorry, it's already too late for you. A private equity exit or acquisition from a bigger company is quieter and easier to in most cases. In terms of the deal, don't have to be public record in the press release, so there is nothing for the journalists at Forbes to dig up. Once you have secured the bag, you should then invest it broadly in the market and avoid putting too much money into any one company. If you own 5% or more of any public company, you must file what is known as a Form 13D with the SEC. 13Ds are public for anybody to see because the SEC wants investors to be aware of who the biggest shareholders are in a public company. If someone with more than 5% of the company's shares needed to sell quickly, they would push down the stock's price significantly. Investors should pay close attention to who a company's top shareholders are, because if it's the people that will be in a bad financial situation personally, it will be bad for the stock price even if the business fundamentals are good. As a billionaire that values their privacy, you would be best served to limiting any individual investments to no more than 4.99% of the company's shares. This has the additional benefit of making sure you are diversified as well. Another way the SEC can snitch on you to Forbes magazine is through a Form 3. This must be filed if you own more than 10% of a public company, or if you are a company officer like a CEO, CFO, or chief legal counsel. A Form 3 also needs to be filed if you are a company director, so if you want to stay hidden, don't take too many of these positions. You can have $1 billion portfolio, and only the holdings you have in the companies you are a director of will be public. So if you want to sit on a few boards, you can, but it will put your name out there. The other way that your wealth becomes public knowledge is through lawsuit discovery. If you get sued, anything that gets turned up by the lawyers is entered into public record, except for in the rare circumstances that evidence gets sealed. The best way to avoid lawsuits is to avoid attention. So as a new billionaire that's trying to stay out of the public eye, you are already doing everything right. Billionaires will also take advantage of holding companies and trusts set up in states that have strong asset protection and privacy laws like Nevada and North Dakota. If you live outside of America, you should consult my video on the Panama Papers to find out how the global billionaires get it done. Once you have the accounting set up, the next step is to just avoid the ostentatious displays of wealth. You can still live in a beautiful home. Just make sure it's in a private area and that it's not the most expensive in the area. You can still drive a nice car, but don't post about it all over social media. You can still fly private, but don't put a logo or name down the side of your plane. Your best defense is being too boring to write about and for your actual wealth to be too difficult to verify. But here's the deal. Even the billionaires we do know about are having problems. As it turns out, having a lot of money and keeping a lot of money are very different skills. Now, I know it might be hard to feel too bad about the financial struggles of people earning 10 times the median income, and the general response to this report online was, not too sympathetic. But it does reveal a lot about the way our economy has changed since this report was first published just 10 years ago. Now, history is of course filled with endless stories about people who have blown through enormous fortunes, but these have been rare exceptions to the rule, and these stories have mostly come from athletes, celebrities, and lottery winners. People who make a lot of money in a short period of time and then get themselves into trouble by assuming that they will always make that much money. In the past, most financial professionals would generally agree that beyond a certain income level, you can just brute force your way through a lot of dumb financial decisions. And as long as you maintain that income, you'd have to try pretty hard to not get richer every year. But today, financial hardship amongst the top 1% of income earners has gone from a rare cautionary tale to the majority. And ironically, one of the biggest groups contributing to this trend are those same financial professionals. So if this data is to be believed, one of two things have happened. Either rich people have gotten a lot dumber with their money, or certain industries have just gotten a lot better at taking it from them. Sometimes when parsing through economic data, it's important to see the funny side in it all. And one of the funniest developments of the last decade is the growing levels of inequality amongst the top 1%. According to studies conducted by UBS and Altrata, there are between 50 and 60 million millionaires in the world at the moment. But even amongst this group of extremely wealthy global residents, the top 1% amongst them still holds almost a third of their collective wealth. Now, these studies were tracking accumulated wealth rather than annual income, but it still showed the same problem. Nobody feels poorer every day than really rich people. Except for very particular careers like service staff, people overwhelmingly interact with other people from within their general income grouping. If you work an upper middle class professional job, there is a good chance your partner also works a middle class professional job. You will live in a neighborhood with other upper middle class professionals, your friends from college would have gone on to get similar middle class jobs, and your kids will probably go to school with other kids from other middle class families. An article published by the Journal of Nature that tracked over 72 million Facebook connections found that socioeconomic status was the main determinant of who you are friends with. This means that day in and day out, you are going to interact with people living a somewhat similar lifestyle to your own. Sure, within this group, there will be some differences in take-home pay. Your neighbors might be a rung above you on the corporate ladder, and you might feel the need to keep up with their new cars or nice vacations. But apart from a few small details, people 10% below you and people 10% above you on the income distribution spectrum are going to live the same kind of life. In other words, within your social circle, inequality usually isn't that extreme. The study also found this to be true for households with the lowest incomes. They overwhelmingly interacted with other low-income households, which had a negative impact on economic mobility. The old adage of, it's who you know, not what you know, is unfortunately absolutely true. And if the only people you know aren't in a position to give you any special favors, it's much harder to get ahead regardless of ability. But that's a separate issue that we don't have time to get into today. Where this gets really interesting, though, is by moving the scale all the way to the top. It's only here that extreme inequality is visible within a decile of wealth. If you earn $500,000 a year as an analyst at a private equity firm, you are wealthy by almost anybody's standards. But compared to your general partner who is making $10 million a year, you are basically destitute. Basically, nowhere else on the income spectrum would you be working alongside someone else that made 20 times more than you. That general partner will also be raising money from billionaire investors who, by comparison, make them look poor. And then when those mere single-digit billionaires fly to Davos, they are going to be rubbing shoulders with other business people several hundred times richer than them. There are several orders of magnitude in income and wealth variance within just the top 1%, which means lifestyle comparison is far more damaging. If you work as a roofer, your colleagues might convince you that you need to lease a new F-150. If you work in a hedge fund, your colleagues might convince you to fly private to Art Basel for the networking. This is part of the reason why people making only $200,000 to $300,000 a year were doing significantly better financially in the Goldman Sachs study. On average, these people were still living in the real world and were largely exposed to other normal people. Demographers have dubbed this socioeconomic fractality, and it was actually first observed by Vilfredo Pareto when he was poring over tax documents more than 100 years ago. You may know this guy from the Pareto Principle or the 80-20 rule, so that's pretty cool. But in the 100 years since this was first observed, some things have changed. Recent booms in global wealth have further divided this tiny group of wealthy people, and that's done two things. The first is that it's created absolutely hilarious situations that you are all welcome to point and laugh at. Like this guy complaining in a local Palo Alto paper that billionaires building their mega mansions were, and I quote, running roughshod over average millionaires like himself. This is unironically just one of many, many instances of millionaires complaining about how hard they have it now. But while it's fun to laugh, there is something more here. Inequality has always existed, and as dumbfounding as the recent spike in millionaires living paycheck to paycheck is, it does shine some light on some other concerning developments. So the extreme concentration of wealth at the very top of the distribution has become more pronounced over recent years. But it's not new just by itself. Merely wealthy people have always been exposed to extremely wealthy people. Just because they have gone from 100 times wealthier to 400 times wealthier doesn't really change the arithmetic of inadequacy. What this has changed, though, is how expensive it is to be a rich person. Now, the most obvious example of this is the cities people are living in. Unless you are running your own business or working as a specialist doctor, there are really only a few cities in America with jobs that pay more than $500,000 a year, and the house prices in all of these cities are amongst the most expensive on the planet. If you want an average family home within commuting distance of Seattle, Silicon Valley, Manhattan, or even Miami, you are going to be paying 7 figures for the privilege. Put a 50-year mortgage on that, and then after income, property, and state taxes, in most of these centers, that is going to leave you with around $50,000 a year in actual disposable income. Now, I know what you are thinking. $50,000 a year after taxes and housing are accounted for would be a dream for most families. And you would be absolutely right. But there are 2 reasons why for many ultra-high-income earners, it's not. The first reason is quite simply that just because someone is earning a high income does not mean that they are smart with money, or even that smart in general. People who choose high-prestige careers are, rather shockingly, often motivated by, well, prestige, which means they will happily go into debt to keep up appearances around their peers. $50,000 after taxes and housing can easily pay for a comfortable lifestyle, but it doesn't cover a luxurious lifestyle. People who land high-income roles also have a sense of entitlement to these luxuries since it often takes years of highly competitive schooling to get there. So, once they have made it through all of that and landed their first real job, it's time to treat themselves. Of course, the career path where this is most common is medical doctors. An article published by the British Medical Journal, as well as a separate survey from the University of Pennsylvania, found that most American physicians were graduating medical school with practically zero financial literacy. And yes, despite the name, the British Medical Journal judges us here in America too. Anyway, this doesn't actually make doctors that unique by itself. Most people have practically zero financial responsibility. The difference is that because of their much higher than average incomes, people like doctors are given access to far more dangerous financial tools right from the beginning. When you add in the fact that these young graduates are also already comfortable with having taken out 6-figure debt to get through medical school in the first place, it's really easy for a bank to sell them a big home loan and a car loan on top of that. Even seasoned financial professionals can get in trouble with this stuff if they are not careful. So, giving this much rope to someone without a clue is very dangerous. It would be like skipping through to the end of a very challenging video game and giving yourself a max level character. Theoretically, you have all the right tools to deal with endgame content, but unless you actually know what you are doing, you can easily get yourself into trouble if even the smallest thing goes wrong. Now, doctors get a lot of attention for this, because financial stress amongst practitioners has been connected to worse patient outcomes, which is bad for everybody. But they are not alone. Even finance bros who should, theoretically, be good at this stuff frequently take on too much debt to keep up with everybody around them and find themselves living paycheck to paycheck. So yeah, high-income earners not being as smart as they think they are may come as a shock to them, but maybe not so much as a shock to you. But the second reason why financial hardship has become so common amongst these people is because companies have realized that this is where the money is now, and they have rushed in to fill any gaps in their budgets. The old team at Micro did a great video a few months ago about the hyperinflation of the hyper-wealthy. I will leave a link to it below if you are interested in the details. But the rough summary is that the number of products, services, and experiences dedicated exclusively to extremely wealthy people has exploded in recent years. 20 years ago, there was only one production car that retailed for more than $1 million, and that was the Bugatti Veyron. Today, even after accounting for inflation, there are more than 100 different models in this price range, and new offerings frequently cost in excess of $5 million. This is a clear example, but even for people at the plebeian end of the 1%, high-end hotels, credit cards, social clubs, sports, events, clothing, airline seats, even high-end gyms and grocery stores have all developed to offer an exclusive service at a massively inflated price. Not all high-income earners will buy this stuff, and even those who do won't buy all of it. But the point is that there are more options than ever at the buffet of conspicuous consumption, and even $500,000 a year won't buy all you can eat like it used to. Now again, I know it's hard to feel too bad for these people, but all of this still comes with 2 very big caveats. The first is that the only reason why high-income household budgets are being targeted so hard is because the budgets of average incomes have already been optimally exploited. Between the various flavors of consumer debt and price increases, most people don't have that much left to give, which means companies are almost being forced to go up market to grow their revenue. I have mentioned it before, but even Walmart has attributed most of their recent sales growth to targeting higher income consumers, since most other households have already been maxed out. High income households are only starting to feel the pinch because everybody else has already been thoroughly juiced. Oh yeah, And the final most important caveat is that a lot of these high-income households can still end up doing just fine in the long run. Their paycheck to paycheck isn't yet the same as everybody else's. Struggling to make the mortgage payments on a home in Seattle may be just as financially stressful as struggling to make rent. But in 30 years, those people should have fully paid off a home in one of the most expensive cities on the planet. High-income employees also get benefits like employer-funded retirement accounts or restricted stock units that can provide a scheduled liquidity boost even if they are living paycheck to paycheck for the rest of the year to cover their living expenses. Wealth inequality and income inequality go hand in hand, because if you earn a high income, you can build up wealth faster than someone with a lower income. But what we are seeing today is, thanks to massive asset price appreciation, you still won't be able to build wealth with your income faster than people can create income from their wealth. And remember, this is all just taking place within the top 1%. But for the rest of us, we made an extended cut video explaining why, in many ways, having a boring job is actually not a bad thing, which is up on the screen to go and watch now. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep on learning how money works.
If you follow this recipe, I guarantee you can make a better lasagna at home than you can get in a restaurant. This isn't a crazy recipe. It's actually pretty straightforward. A huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. More on that later. Let's get stuck in. First thing we need to tackle is the ragu. And the reason we do it first is because it's going to take the longest. So an Italian ragu starts with soffritto, which is like the French called mirepoix. Now every Italian chef, most chefs I've worked with, have always just grated this. But I think it's worth the effort of dicing. So the carrots, top and bottoms off, peel them. And then I find it easier to cut them in half. So we slice them about half a centimetre thick into backings, and then just working in small batches into brunoise. So if you're sitting here thinking, come on Andy, I don't have all day, I can't chop like that, then I would say this is a great way to learn how to do it. And if you're still going to struggle with it, then honestly grating it or using a food processor is also good. I think I like the consistency you get better doing it by hand, and it will still hold up a little bit of texture once your ragu is cooked out. So the onion just in half, run your blade down. We've kept the core on purpose. What that does is hold it all together, and then horizontal all the way through to just before the core, and now down. Nice, even slices. Celery. We're going to get rid of the leaves. So similar to the carrot, we're going to cut battens first, and then we're going to brunoise the battens. And I think the celery is probably the only one that you can't actually put through a grater. A lot of the time when I've seen formidable Italian restaurants make this, they'll grind their meat, and at the last line, they'll just shove the carrots, onions, and celery in with the meat. That feels quite lazy to me. One of the things about taking the time to make a really delicious ragu is getting really good maillard on your meat, and you can't do that if the veggies are in there. Garlic. Now, you can put as much garlic as you want in this, but traditionally there's not actually heaps of garlic used especially in northern Italian cooking. They go pretty kind of cautious on it. I think the use of a lot of garlic in Italian cooking is largely to do with American Italian cooking. Nothing wrong with it. It's just often I think some Italians get frustrated at the amount of garlic that we put in our Italian food. So this amount of ragu, I'm just going to put 4 cloves of garlic in here. It's not supposed to be a really strong garlic flavour, just a little undertone, like. The only other thing we're going to get ready at this point, which seems a little bit weird, but we're going to take the rind off our parmesan. We'll obviously use some parmesan later, but the reason we take that off is because we actually want to use this part in our ragu. This stuff is full of natural occurring MSG, like really high levels of it, and it's going to make our ragu super delicious and moorish. We've got that ready too. Next up, we have 1 kilo of meat in total, and we really want to start by getting really good colour on the outside of all this meat. Building up Maillard, which adds really deep, kind of meaty flavour. Now I've got 1/2 kilo of beef mince, like 80-20 beef mince, and 1/2 kilo of reasonably high fat pork mince. I think that's a really good blend, but you absolutely can use other meats as well. I think the beef is kind of the good starting point, and then your accessory, your other half, you kind of go a little bit crazy with and do some weird stuff. But the meat to lean ratio is really important. You want roughly an 80% lean to 20% meat ratio. So a Dutch oven here on a high heat, and I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Once that olive oil is hot, you can see it starting to smoke. We're going to break up the beef into small pieces. We're not going to dump it all in at once. We're going to do small pieces. And I reckon this 500 grams of beef mince, probably going to take 2 batches to do. So in that goes, it gets a reasonable seasoning of salt, and we let it sit there for about 8 to 10 minutes before we chop it up, stir it through, make sure it's brown on all sides. We're going to remove it and set it aside. Repeat with the rest of the beef mince, and then do the same with the pork mince. So one of the most interesting things about lasagna is that honestly, it gets better and better over time. The day before yesterday, I actually made 2 more of these. I put one in the fridge and I put one in the freezer. So then at the end of this video, we can taste them all together and we can figure out where the point of deterioration happens, which makes this the perfect dish to make multiple of instead of just one. Even if you have no intention of using it, just make it and shove it in your freezer, because the next Sunday when you had a busy day and you can't actually bother cooking, you'll thank yourself for it then. So that's the last batch done, and that took like 40 minutes in total, and it's absolutely worth taking the time to do it. Can you do it faster? Absolutely, but it will affect the end flavour. Not affect it in a negative way, it can just be a lot better if you do take the time to do it. I'm going to pull the rest of this meat out, and we can start building our ragu. We're going to see how much fat we've got in here, and that looks like too much. So we're going to pour it out. You pour it all out, I find that easier. And start again. Have a look at the bottom of your pan. This one's not too bad. If it's like you kind of got it a bit hot and it's a little bit burnt from the bottom, you're going to clean the pan out and start fresh. But if it's got a little bit of stuff, it's fine. We're going to add about a tablespoon of the fat back to the pan. And it's time to start sweating down our sofrito. We're going to start with the hardest veggies first. So get the carrots in there first up. A little pinch of salt. Really important that we season all the way through on cooks like this. If you just put it all on at the start or all on at the end, you're not building layers of flavour. You don't need heaps, but just all the way through, little bits of salt. Okay, after a couple of minutes, we're going to add in our onions. We're going to sweat those down for about 2 minutes, and then we're going to add our celery and garlic. So why do we sweat down onions and garlic instead of just dumping everything in raw? It's all going to get cooked anyway, isn't it? Well, the reason we do it is that we're trying to develop sugars, and develop the sugars specifically in the carrots and the onions first, which is going to balance out our flavour profile of our whole ragu. Which is why often you see some people in home cooks specifically, sorry for calling you out, but home cooks often putting sugar in their ragu, and that's because they usually haven't taken the time to develop the sweetness in the vegetables first. Next, meat goes back in, stir that through, red wine. So you want that full-bodied red wine, you know, like a Genovese or a Shiraz or something like that. If you don't want to use wine for whatever reason, you can just replace that with some stock, honestly, and some water. We're just going to reduce this wine for about 5 or 6 minutes. We're just trying to burn off the real harsh alcohol, and then we can add our tomato and continue cooking it out. So often in restaurants, they just kind of can't, they don't have enough time to put as much love into this, which is, I think, one of the reasons why it doesn't taste quite as good. So, tomato passata, in that goes. We're going to make sure we get all of that out with a little bit of water, stir that through, Now we put our Parmesan rind in as well. Oh, almost broke that. Okay, so this is the point where we want to get this simmering very slowly and we want to let it cook. I think optimal is actually like 6 hours. It's often not reality. You can do it in 2 hours. You can do it in 4 hours, 6 hours is even better. So want to really slowly ticking away. This is something that I like to do first thing on a Sunday morning. Just leave it on the side, the smallest burner. Every 20, 30 minutes, go to it, just give it a quick stir, make sure it's all right, let it do its thing. I'm going to clean down, and then we'll attack some pasta. Just real quick before we carry on, a huge thank you to the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. It's the all-in-one website platform perfect for any of your website needs. Whether you're starting a website for your business or looking for a place to post some recipes, Squarespace has templates for every use and category that are professionally designed and completely customizable. Make them your own and stand out online on all devices. But if you'd like to build a site from the ground up, then you can use design intelligence to bring your ideas to life, streamlining the design process so that you can build a website that perfectly suits your needs. Squarespace uses cutting-edge AI technology to make it possible for anyone to design their own dream website. And with Squarespace payments built in, sales are a breeze. Just a few clicks and you can start receiving payments right away with a wide range of payment methods for your customers. Your business can be ready to take payments in no time. Head over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use code squarespace.com/AndyCooks to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Now let's go roll some pasta. So pasta. I'm a big fan of verde or green pasta for this dish, but if you didn't want to use it, you can absolutely just skip the spinach part, and you're just going to run off 100 grams of flour for every egg. What we're going to do is 3 eggs, 320 grams of flour, and the spinach, and that extra bit of flour is going to help just absorb any extra liquid that we get from the spinach. I've got a large pot of salted boiling water. In that spinach goes. This would traditionally be done with like big leaf spinach. It's really hard to find big leaf spinach now, so this is just baby spinach, which will cook a lot faster than the big leaf stuff. You do want this to hit the water and come back up to a boil so that we can extract as much of the chlorophyll as we can, which means we get a very green pasta. Drain this and cool it down really quickly. It smells like popcorn. Just give it a quick rinse with some cold water to knock out some of that heat from it. Then plunge it into ice cold water. Make sure your colander is not hot. Pull your spinach out and squeeze as much liquid as you can out of it. To the bit. We'll take our spinach and put it into a blender. And honestly, this is the best way to start making fresh pasta. As you're learning to make pasta, to get cracks in it or it's not quite perfect, the lasagna is going to hide it. You'll be fine. And then once you're kind of more confident in making pasta, then you can make ravioli and fettuccine and all kinds of other things. Because making your own pasta, it's honestly worth it. It really does level up pasta dishes. And it's like, it sounds like a really cliche thing to say, but it's also quite rewarding. I genuinely find it really therapeutic. The trick with this is we want to get this as smooth as we can. The issue you can find is that if you blend this for too long, you're going to start cooking your eggs, which is not good. I find if you start on a low speed, just to kind of get it incorporated before you give it a good whack, it's going to be good. But we do want this to be really smooth, but we do need to get it there as fast as we can. So just let it do its thing for a second, settle down, and then full speed. Looking good. As long as we can't see any big bits of spinach, it should be good to go. If you don't have a blender, you can do this by hand. You're going to have to chop it for quite a while on a board. No problem at all. It's not going to look as like smooth as this, but it still will give you that green colour throughout the pasta. Okay, flour, which is type 00, tipo flour. What does that mean? High protein and very fine. If you can't find that, just stuff an all-purpose flour will work. Straight onto a clean bench, create a well in the centre, add your egg and spinach mixture, tablespoon of olive oil. So using a fork, start from the centre and work your way out. Just try and incorporate that flour slowly. The only thing you really don't want to do right now is break that moat. And if you're not making the verde pasta, the green pasta, whisk your eggs well first before you start incorporating the flour. Once it's not really, breaking the dam down, you can start getting a bit more rogue. Now get your handy dandy Andy Cooks Essential Scraper and start chopping your flour into your green. So once you get to this point, you can use flour to start kneading. I find it easier to kind of bring the dough towards yourself and then use the heel of your hand to push away, across, away. You'll get into like a little rhythm. That is one impressive colour. So that's kneaded for about 5 or 6 minutes. It's nice and smooth and the colour is intense, which is what we're after. Get it into one sort of mat. You will need to roll it out a little bit, so it's kind of easy to start now. And I like to get it into like quite a square shape. So then you're going to put that in like a Ziploc bag or in cling film in the fridge, and you're going to rest it for like an hour or 2 hours in the fridge, or even better, you can do it overnight. If you do it overnight, just remember to pull it out about an hour before you roll it out. Goodbye. So our ragu's been going for a couple of hours. Let's have a look. I've been stirring it every sort of, I guess, 15-ish minutes. It's looking pretty good. This is the sort of consistency that you want, even a little bit drier than you actually want. So if you find yourself in this position, don't be afraid just to add some water. Scrape down your sides too, don't be a grub. Right, time to roll our pasta. You can absolutely do this with a rolling pin, ideally a really big one. I've done it before, no issues there at all. If you have got one of these, then you might as well use it. First of all, do like a envelope fold. So we're trying to laminate effectively. So the light dusting of flour on both sides of your pasta. And then I've got this on the thickest setting, and through we go. So once we come out once, we're going to fold it over a third and a third. Give it another light dusting, and then this is actually way too big, so I'm going to cut it in half. Just going to shove a tea towel over the top of that one, because if you don't, it'll dry out. So you go through again on that thick setting. You're going to repeat one more of the folds. And then we fold it that way, then that way. We're going to put it through the machine starting at this end. You don't want this to feel sticky. If it feels sticky, you need to dust it or it will get stuck. Put it through one more time on that thickness, and then we can start going thinner and thinner and thinner until we get the thickness that we're looking for. If you don't have a huge bench, you can just work in much smaller pieces. It's not really an issue with this. As long as they're not any smaller than the dish that you plan to assemble your lasagna in at the end. So I'm going to go to the second to thinnest number on this pasta machine here. But actually go to there. Just tell me what to do. So I've got a really large pot with lots of boiling water. You season it, reasonably well. It's a lot of water. I know it looks like a lot of salt. If you season it and then taste it, it should taste like seasoned water. Shouldn't taste like the ocean. And you don't put olive oil in it. And don't put your fingers in boiling water either. That's just silly. Okay, we're going to take our pasta sheets, carefully one at a time, lower them in, and cook them. And they don't need long, say 45 seconds. Then remove, let all that hot water drain off, mainly because we don't want to destroy our ice cold water, into the ice cold water to stop the cooking. Repeat with all the pasta, and then we'll trim them. We don't trim them now because we want them to be perfect length for when they're in the dish. Makes it a little bit trickier to deal with, but it's worth it. While that one's in there, this one will be cold enough to pull out, drain off any liquid and ice, and put in the tray. Looks like seaweed. All right, I'm going to clean down and we can make some bechamel. Our ragu has been going for 3 hours and 58 minutes. I have no idea, but it's been a while. Let's have a look. Almost ready. We need to cool this down, finish it, cool it down before we start assembling. So you're going to pull this piece of crumbs out. You have done your job. Thank you, kind sir. It's time for you to say goodbye. Ooh, it tastes good. So, taste of the season. Delicious. We've got enough sweetness, that's for sure, on sourness. Does need a little bit of salt, unsurprisingly. I reckon that'd be good. And we've got one magical ingredient to finish it off. 100 mils of milk, fairly controversial. Stir that through. It looks luscious. It looks like that romance you had once in a holiday. So we need to cool this down. The best way to cool this stuff down is to get it on a big tray, nice and flat, and it'll cool down really fast. Like an hour in the fridge, no problem, even less in the freezer. Just be careful if you put it in the freezer, you run the risk of kind of melting some other stuff. So I'm going to shove this in the fridge, have a little wash up, and bechamel on the way. Alright, bechamel. You can make it with ricotta instead if you don't want to make bechamel, but I think it's good. I've had an argument with finished. Let's not mention it. Get your butter in a pot and you're going to melt it. Once your butter's melted, add the flour and whisk. Turn down to a medium heat. We really want to cook this flour out at this time, but we're not trying to make like a dark roux like you would if you're making like gumbo. We're making a white roux. Now season it with salt. You see here it's looking like a thick paste. It's nice and blonde in colour. You don't want that colour to change. Once it starts to smell like cookies, we can start adding our milk. You're going to add about 100, 150 mils at a time, whisk it in, it'll thicken up and seize, add more milk and whisk it in. Continue doing that till all the milk is completely absorbed into your roux and you've got no lumps. It's really important that you don't just dump all the milk in at once. If you do that, you will end up with a lumpy bechamel. No one likes a lumpy bechamel, do they? Once you're at the point where it's kind of a sauce, a thick sauce anyway, make sure you mix it until all the lumps are gone. Don't be tempted to let it go lumpy and just work them all out at the end. Do it as you go. Make sure as well that you're getting all the sides and the corners of the pot. Sometimes you can forget the corner closest to you and you'll end up randomly with a lump and you'll be like, where did that come from? Once all the milk's in there, we're just going to whisk this over a medium heat until it thickens up and it's at the consistency you're looking for. This is the right consistency for bechamel. I think it's very easy to show you with a spoon, but it's not super thick. I think when they're super thick, they're really hard to spread around, and as it cooks, it just gets too gluggy. So that's a nice consistency. It should coat the back of a spoon really nicely. Heat off. Season it with salt and fresh grated nutmeg. Not too much. That's probably about 1/8 of a whole nutmeg, and that should be more than enough. One last taste of seasoning. Done. We can start assembling soon. We're just going to get a few things ready. You can just leave this here. Just keep mixing it every time we walk past it, and that'll stop the skin from forming. All right, this is a good part. Time to assemble. First thing, make sure you've got everything ready. So what do we need? Our meat sauce, our bechamel, our pasta sauce. We need some tomato passata, mozzarella, and parmesan, both grated. We need some basil too, but that's later on. Okay, so another important factor. I think we need 5 layers of pasta. That's this one. First layer, meat sauce, always first. The other trick is with lasagna assembling is not to go crazy with each layer. Okay, you can see here I've kind of divvied the meat sauce up into 5. That way you know you're not guessing. Spread it out evenly all across the bottom. The meat sauce temperature is kind of important. We don't want this ice cold. In an ideal world, it's room temperature. If it's ice cold, the fat solidifies and it becomes quite hard to manipulate. Next step, pasta. Now the reason we kept these sheets as big as we could so we can get as nice, well actually in a hot trick, I know that this piece is the nicest piece that I have, so I'm just gonna save that for the top. You stay right there. So you're gonna lay your sheet out, making sure it's on all sides, and then just carefully, I mean you can do it before you put it in even, but cut it. So you wanna make sure it's completely covered, and ideally there's not too much overlay. A little bit's alright, but you don't want like an excessive amount of pasta. If it does go up the sides like that, just fold it down so that it's not bogging that next layer. One layer, done. So next we go for the cheeses. Drizzle the bechamel on. It's not like piping hot, but it is hot. And the reason being is you can't really cool this down. I like to kind of spread it out and make sure there's enough there. Mozzarella. You know, a younger Andy would just be piling this all on. A bit of restraint is really necessary here. Parmesan, freshly grated, not from a jar. And then we repeat, keep doing that until we get to the last layer, and I'll show you what we do at the top. Okay, so this is the last, or the 5th layer of pasta. But we don't put meat sauce on the top of this one. So because it's the last layer, we also do want to take the time to make it lovely and neat. Tuck it into there. This is where we put straight tomato passata instead of the meat sauce. Spread that across. It gives it a nicer finish on the top. Because it's got no fat in it, you're not going to get like a real greasy top. And if you had straight pasta, it'd dry out. We've still got some cheese left. So the baking process is a 2-step process. We're going to cover this in foil now, put it in a 180-degree oven for about 35 to 40 minutes. Then we'll take the foil off and add the cheese. I'll show you that in a minute. So this has been 40 minutes, foil off. Carefully, because it might stick to the pasta. Now we summoned our inner Kamala and we put a layer of basil leaves. If you don't know what we're talking about, Kamala was the character, in my opinion, the best television show of all time. The Sopranos. Fight me in the comments if you disagree. Then next we're going on with parmesan, mozzarella, and then we go back in the oven at 180 degrees until we're lovely and golden brown. If after 10 or 12 minutes it's not going really golden yet, you can put your oven on grill function, and that should definitely kind of get it all bubbly and lovely. be really careful. Watch it like a hawk if you do put it on that. Now, whatever you do not eat this rice. Let it sit for at least 10 minutes before you cut into it. At least. All right. I've waited long enough. We all know that if you don't choose a corner piece, layer of meaty, cheesy, carby goodness. All right, let's have a taste. For sake, Ben. Let's have a taste. That is stunning. Rich, meaty, full of umami, great texture going on there. But I think we can make it better. Right, so what we have here is the same lasagna. We made these 2 days ago. This one here, we left the top layer of cheese and basil on in the frozen. We pulled the thing out of the freezer for about an hour, and we put the whole thing covered in foil into a 180-degree oven before then adding the cheese and basil like we did in this one. Just grilled it up for another 15 minutes, and that's where we're at today. We did the same thing with this one, but it was never frozen. It was just put in the fridge for about 48 hours. No cheese, no basil, the last 15 minutes. Cheese and basil. This one only took about 45 minutes to heat through. Let's see how they taste. We'll start with the fridge first. I mean, it's no real secret. Ragu that has time to rest once it's cooked always tastes better. I'm pretty sure there's scientific papers on the issue. It's not even an issue, it's a predicament. Still a nice crunchy top layer. And the frozen? The only sacrifice you make is the pasta. The ragu just gets better. I can't taste much of a difference between these two and ragu, but the pasta is definitely better than the fresh one. It's not quite as good in the fridge one, and it's not quite as good in the frozen one. But for me, that is a sacrifice I am more than willing to take to have one of these in my freezer at all times. Thank you so much for watching, legends. Like this video if you've taken anything from it, subscribe if you're not. And a huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring. We'll see you next week for another recipe. India eats 1.2 billion dosas a day. Now, we can't fully verify that, but anything claiming that sort of number must be delicious. So if you're not familiar, a dosa is South India's beloved crispy crepe. Think of it as the world's most delicious savoury pancake, but Japan might have something to say about that. While they can seem intimidating to make at home, this recipe is guaranteed to give you great results no matter what kitchen you've got. Now, forget any special equipment. The secret to a golden crispy dosa is a method I'm about to share with you. By the end of this video, you're going to be making restaurant quality dosa with the perfect texture every time. And that's not all. We're going to complete the dish with an amazing spiced potato filling, 2 chutneys and a special gunpowder spice mix. Now let's get stuck in. So first up, we need to make the batter, and it's accidentally, I guess, gluten-free. We've got 4 ingredients, excluding the water, in the batter. Basmati rice, urad dal, which is a black lentil that's been skinned and is cut in half, basically. Then we have chana dal, which is a brown chickpea that's also skinned. Then we have fenugreek, which is a spice, like quite a fragrant spice, and you use quite a lot of this. All that goes into the bowl, your basmati rice into the bowl, then your chickpeas, and urda dal. So this is a fermented batter, and what does that mean? Well, it means it's got to sit around for a while, and the bacteria have to grow in it, which is what gives it flavour and gives it fluffiness. So it looks like it's way more complicated than it is in the recipe. It's honestly not that complicated. From here, all we have to do is rinse all our grains 2 or 3 times, and then we're going to leave them in fresh water for around 4 hours. And that's for them to soak up some of the water and start to soften. At that point, we blend it with some of that water until we reach the consistency of something that looks like paint or wet paint. Now, one tip I will say is don't just pour all the water in at the start. Just pour a little bit in and add it as you need it, because you don't want to have to pull it out. Scared me. To do it in batches, and then you know it's done when you rub it together in your fingers, and you're going to feel some grain. That's fine. You don't want it completely smooth. You probably won't get it completely smooth, but you don't want to feel like big lumps. Pour it into a container and continue with the rest. Okay, so this batter is now done for the next 10 to 15 hours, depending where you live in the world. And it really is the foundation of everything we're about to do. You've got to get this right, otherwise you're not going to get the nice crisp dosa. It's going to taste right. And worth noting, we haven't put any salt in this yet, and that's for good reason, because we don't want the salt to inhibit the bacteria growth. We put the salt in tomorrow when we're ready to actually make the dosa. The other thing we'll do is we'll make sure that the thickness is correct. So I'm really happy with this thickness right now, but I am going to keep this leftover liquid that we soaked our rice in, and that's what we can use to adjust the liquid if we need. So that's just going to get covered with a lid or a tea towel, whatever you like really. I'm going to leave that at room temperature for at least 10 hours, up to 15. We did one for 20 hours the other day and it was still perfectly fine, but it is cold where I am right now. Well, cold, it's like 15 degrees overnight, it's not that cold, but anyway, we'll see you tomorrow when we make one of these delicious crepes. It's a dosa, not a crepe, sorry. So chutneys, now these are really important. I can't emphasize enough the amount of effort you put into your chutney is what's going to flavor the whole dish. We're going to do 2 chutneys, tomato chutney, coconut chutney, which is actually probably my favorite and really delicious. They're both delicious. But there's lots of chutneys you can do here. These are kind of the 2 of the more common ones. And they're pretty simple to make. You can also make it the day before. So you're just making the dosa on the day. But the tomato chutney is pretty simple. We're going to get all our ingredients ready to go in the pot, and then we'll get it into the pot and cook it out for about 40 minutes. So we've got a red onion. We are going to blitz all this, so you know you want it all the same size so it cooks evenly, but you don't need to be kind of too critical of yourself. You've seen those videos where the street vendors are like cutting onions like crazy ways, and it's like, it scares me every time. Tomatoes, 4. Also a weirdo, I love the smell of tomato stalks. We're just going to dice these. Don't dice them too small because you want to keep all that tomato liquid that's in there. If you dice them too small, most of it's going to run away. So in half, and then each half into quarters. We have 6 cloves of garlic. We are just going to smash them and run a knife through it. Thumb-sized piece of ginger. Now, as my mate Fred says, everyone's got different sized thumbs. Use what feels right to you. I feel like a thumb-sized piece of ginger is... I asked someone about it in one of my videos, and they were like, it's because a piece of ginger looks like a pen. So that's where the term came from. Technical term. I like it. We're just going to slice it one way, and then again the other way, and then dice it. The other thing you could do is you could just shove your garlic and your ginger in a food processor and blitz it, make it like a garlic ginger paste, or you can grate it with a fine grater or a microplane. But considering we're going to blitz this, I just prefer to dice it by hand. We've got 2 of the little green chilies that is very common in India. If you can't find them, sometimes they can be hard to find. I used to struggle finding them in the Sunshine Coast, so I can get them pretty easily now in Sydney. You can just use like a large size chili. They're not quite as spicy, those large ones. Just slice them through. The only other thing we need is these curry leaves, fresh curry leaves. Again, can be tricky to find. If you can't find them, unfortunately the dried stuff, I don't know if you can get dried curry, I'm sure you can. It doesn't have the punchiness and flavour. So if you are using dried, like at least double it, or just leave it up to be perfectly honest. So I've got a pot here, then I'm going to cook the chutney in all the way through. Turn that on like a medium heat. Bit of neutral flavoured oil on the bottom. Then we have mustard seeds, cumin seeds, and some of the dal, so the black lentils. We're just going to toast those for a couple of minutes, just until the mustard seeds and the cumin are nice and aromatic. But don't burn it, whatever you do. Whatever you do, like it's like the world's going to fall apart. It's not, but an Indian grandmother's going to look down on you if you fail her at life. All right, our spices are nicely toasted and they're starting to pop like popcorn. So quickly get our onion in there, as well as the garlic, ginger, green chili, and our mustard full mental blank, and our curry leaves. Pinch of salt. Just going to saute this for 3 or 4 minutes until it starts to soften. Good smelling pot too. And you might be wanting to like rush and then just like get your tomatoes in there and cook all that. Take the time to cook your aromats out first, because by the time you get your tomato in and you cook it out, you really want to make sure that the onions, garlic, everything is cooked through and soft before you add anything else. It's all about layering flavour. All right, so our onions are nice and soft now. Time to get the tomatoes in. Tamarind paste. I love tamarind. I could literally eat it like that. Add some water. Give that a stir. All right, now we're going to simmer this medium-low heat for about 40 minutes till the tomatoes are fully cooked. All those flavours that have chances to come together. Then we'll blitz it. It'll be done. While that's simmering away, let's crack on with our coconut chutney. And you need a coconut. Now you can do this with desiccated, but honestly, it's worth getting one of these and doing it properly. First things first, you're gonna crack your coconut. You actually want to crack it kind of this way. You're gonna do it over a bowl. We want to save the coconut water. We're gonna use some of it in the recipe, and I'll probably drink the rest because it's delicious. So you need a heavy knife. A cleaver works really well. You want the back of the cleaver, and we're gonna whack it pretty hard. Just be careful, okay? Don't hit your hand. You're not gonna cut yourself with this. It's the back of the cleaver, but it's gonna hurt if you hit yourself with it. It's coming. Just keep turning it. Oh, hear that? It's now leaking on me. So we just need half of this. Save the other half for something else delicious. Save our liquid. You can take a palette knife and just wiggle it in under the flesh and the skin and pop it out. And the reason I use a palette knife is because it's a lot safer to use than a knife. You could also use like a teaspoon, would work well, or the handle of a teaspoon. If you're lucky, sometimes they come out in like one big piece. I'm clearly not very lucky today. Then you can save this and make your sahi bowl in it, like everyone does in Bondi. First step, eat a piece because it's yum. And clean your board, it's gross. So now we need to get the rest of the skin off, the outside. So you can just use a blade to cut all that off. I bet there's a bunch of people already in the comments laughing at me about how I'm doing this. So, but leave me know in the comments, how should I do this? It's always good to learn. We're here now. Now we're just going to cut our coconut up so it can get processed easier in the blender. And then our other ingredients, we've got a couple of shallots, which we're just gonna, they're also gonna get blended, so slice them up a little bit, but you don't need to get too fine. We've got a couple of green chilies, we're just gonna take the tops off those, and then about, maybe not I guess a thumb size, a small thumb size piece of ginger. Just give it a fine dice so the blender's not starting from scratch. Then we've got some chana dal, so that's the chickpeas. We need to toast those. We'll move this out of the way. Got a dry pan over a medium heat. We're also going to add about a teaspoon of the ashbar, which is kind of like a caraway seed. Toast that really well. While those are toasting, let's get the blender ready. First thing in, coconut. Just dry. I'm going to start breaking this up. Start down low. And that's what we're looking for, like, looks like snow, light, fluffy. If you don't have a high-speed blender, and I fully respect that not everyone does, you can just grate this coconut. So do the same thing, keep it in bigger pieces you can, and then grate it as fine, or kind of as fine as you can. It's a bit of a pain in your arm, but it's perfectly doable. It's not that much of an issue. Now we add everything else. So we got we got some curry leaves. We'll start, that's 6 of those. Our green chili, our shallot, our ginger, and our toasted dal with spices, and around half a cup, go about 2/3, half. Math's not working. We'll go just under half a cup to start to make sure we don't add too much. And a pinch of salt. On the lid goes. Stunning. Let's have a little taste. I love this chutney so much. And the best part, it's not even finished yet. I'll have a little tidy up and then show you how to finish it. So to finish the chutney, we're just going to add about a tablespoon of neutral flavoured oil, like peanut, like I've got here, to a pan over a high heat. While that's heating up, I've got one dried red chilli, which I'm just going to cut in half and just tap out any of the loose seeds. You don't have to stress too much about taking them all out. As I sit there and meticulously take every seed out. Tear those and get them in the oil to start infusing that oil. And we have more curry leaves, so around 6 curry leaves in the oil as well, and black mustard seeds. Only take about a minute and a half over the heat, and then we're going to pour it over our chutney. Over that goes. There you go, there's our coconut chutney done. Let's get a blender back out and we'll blitz our tomato on, and then we're almost ready to start making dosa, but before that, we've got the potatoes to make, and then the gum. So our chutney's cooked for like 40 minutes, and honestly, I forgot about it for a second, so I added a little bit of water because it dried out a little bit. That stuff happens. Don't be afraid to just add a little bit of water if it gets a bit dry. All we need to do now is to blitz it quickly. We don't want it like a puree. We just want it a little bit less chunky than it is, and then it's good to go. One final taste, make sure the seasoning's right. Delicious. And it needs nothing else. Spoil yourself sometimes. Honestly, even if you're like, I'm not making dosa, Andy, don't be silly. Just make this and have it in your fridge. It's delicious. Okay, the last thing we need to make, it's not the last thing at all, we didn't make the gunpowder. The next thing we need to make is the aloo, or the potato. So I've got some baby potatoes here that I've just boiled until they're cooked and they're soft. Put those aside for 1 second. In a large pot over a high heat. Add a couple of tablespoons of neutral flavoured oil. Once your oil's hot, add 1 diced red onion, crushed garlic, green chili, curry leaves, and cumin seeds. Big pinch of salt. Saute that for 4 to 5 minutes until the onions start to go translucent. Now add your cooked potatoes and use a wooden spoon to start breaking them up. Finally, just a little bit of turmeric. Stir that through. And we can leave that to the side until we're ready to use it. You don't want this cold when you put them in your dosa, but you also don't really want it piping hot. You want it kind of room temperature. And the reason that we break those potatoes up in there as opposed to kind of doing it ahead of time or in the water is because we want, a bit of texture. You still want some texture in the potato. You don't want like mashed potato like you would for mashed potato. Let's make some gunpowder. Gunpowder, which is kind of a pretty cool name. It's basically a spicy blend of dried toasted lentils, and you use it to sprinkle over your dosa before you fry them. So we've got all 3 of our dal into a pan on a medium dry heat, and we're going to toast these really well. So now our dal is lovely and toasted. So it's got good golden colour. We'll add the sesame seeds and cumin seeds, and we'll just continue toasting that for another 2 to 3 minutes. Now they're done, just pour them out onto a tray. We need these to cool down a bit. To that pan, a couple of tablespoons of neutral flavoured oil, 4 cloves of garlic, finely grated, 8 dried chilies, seeds and all. Don't be scared. It's called gunpowder for a reason. Pew, pew. So I still don't have any heat on underneath this pan. The residual heat's enough. We don't want to burn this garlic, or it's going to get really bitter. We're also going to add some curry leaves. Our ingredient of the day, or the MVP today, is going to be curry leaves. Pinch of salt. So I've got a spice grinder here, and all I've done is I've stirred through the chili and curry leaf mixture through the dal. Just going to work in batches in the spice grinder, make a mess. And we're just going to blitz it until we have like a nice powder. Now, if you've done that in batches like I have, just make sure you give it a little mix to make sure that the chili level, or the spice level is like even through the whole lot, and break any clumps up. But there's your gunpowder. That can also be used on anything really. It's really good on butter pav, which is like an Indian potato slider, and it's actually delicious. There's a video for that on my channel, links above. Right, that's the gunpowder sorted, everything's prepped, and it's time for the easy part. It's time to make the dosa. We've got everything ready. We've got some clarified butter melted, our gunpowder, our aloo, we've got 2 chutneys, some banana leaves to serve everything on, and we have our fermented deliciousness. So we can see our batter is alive. It's got bubbles at the top. It's thickened up even more. You pull your finger through it and it stays, like it doesn't come back in on itself. And the flavour has developed immensely. Immensely, that's a big word for a simple guy like me. So we just need to season this with some salt now. Doesn't need to be crazy salty, you just need to season it. And then stir it through with your ladle. The last chance to check the consistency, I'm pretty happy with that. If it is a bit thick, then feel free to add a bit more of that leftover water that you should have saved. So we've got our tawa on heat. Now you do not need to use an actual tawa like this. You can just use a cast iron pan. The reason these work so well is because you don't have the edges, so it's easy to kind of get the edges on. But it is just a piece of cast iron that's seasoned, because the real trick isn't actually the pan that you cook it in. It's the temperature that the pan's at, the thickness of your batter, and what point that you add your ghee or your oil. Those are what are going to give you the most incredible texture on your dosa. The other thing we don't do is actually oil this before we cook it. We also need to control the temperature, like I talked about. So you get it really hot. You want it to have a lot of residual heat. So what we need to do is to drop the surface temperature of the pan down, but keep the residual heat underneath. And why we need to do that is because we actually want it to stick to the pan, and then we want it to lift off once it's got good color. So how we drop the surface temperature, we splash it with water. Then we get our batter in the center, and we use a circle motion to push it to the outside. You want to try and have it the same thickness all the way through, and if it starts to break through like you can see there, just go back over it again until you completely cover it with the same thickness all the way around. You're going to wait before you put the ghee on. You want it to start browning, and then we'll add our ghee. Okay, we're starting to see some browning coming through. We'll start dribbling on some ghee and around the outside. You don't need heaps of it. What that's going to do is soak through and basically allow you to lift this off, because we haven't greased it before we put it on. Get our plate ready. Don't rush it. Don't rush it on. I sprinkle a little bit of our gunpowder now. Now we need to release it from the pan. We add our aloo to the center. And we fold over 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Hear that noise, that little crunch? Yeah. Now we need to flip this, like so. Dosa. Now we're just going to add our chutneys, coconut, tomato and onion. I hope this has given you the confidence to try this at home. Let's have a taste. So we're just going to try the chutneys first. Get some aloo, tomato. It's so simple but so complex at the same time. It's absolutely delicious. And remember, the key to this is making sure you trust the process. Get the fermentation right, get the consistency of your batter right, make sure your chutneys are full of flavour, and then get your temperature on your pan right. Not too hot, not too cold. I believe in you. Legends, thank you so much for watching. Make sure if you're not subscribed, then you click that subscribe button. We're here every week with new recipes. Like this video if you're taking anything from it, and we'll see you next week for another recipe.
Momo, or momos. I learnt these from a whole bunch of Nepalese legends I used to work with in restaurants in Melbourne, so they called them momo. However, in a short I did a while ago, I did accidentally call them momos, and I was certainly told in the comments that I got it wrong. So we're gonna make momo, which is a Nepalese or Tibetan, that region of South Asia style dumpling. We're gonna make two types, and we're definitely gonna make the little tomato sauce that they make that goes along with it. They're absolutely delicious. They're not that hard to make, so let's get stuck in. Also, we got a new kitchen. How good. 2 years in the making, new studio, everything's how we wanted it. Open shelves, extraction you can't see that actually works, beautiful lighting. How good. And it's all thanks to you guys. So thank you for watching, and it costs a lot of money, so make sure you like and subscribe. Is that too much? We're gonna make the veg base first, because some people salt it and then let it kind of rest like that. I prefer to cook it out. I think there's kind of both ways you can do it. So real simply, we're just gonna grate our carrot. We're gonna finely chiffonade our cabbage, dice our onion, get our ginger and garlic ready, and then we'll mix it all in a bowl. All right, and lastly, I've got a couple of these like little green chilies, seeds and all. There's only 2 in this whole batch, so if you want it a little bit spicier, you can certainly add a little bit more, but I don't want the kind of nuclear hot. Fry pan, medium heat. A little bit of neutral flavored oil, neutral flavor. Once your oil's up to temp, add your onions. Pinch of salt. Once your onions are sauteed a bit, we're gonna add your garlic and ginger, as well as the chili. And now, the cabbage and carrot. And we're just gonna saute this down for 4 or 5 minutes, make sure all those flavors are well incorporated. We're not trying to cook this like completely through. We still want a little bit of bite in this veg. So I'm just gonna season this again with a bit more salt and some fresh pepper, and just continue to slowly cook it down. So what we're trying to do here is just like evaporate the water out of the veg rather than like really cook the veg. It doesn't matter that we're not, we don't have a really high temperature, we're not creating any caramelization. We're just trying to take some of this moisture out. So what do you think? What do you think? What do you think of the new kitchen? Looks all right, doesn't it? It's good so far. Nice and quiet, no road noise. Everything's where I designed it, so if I ever complain about it, I've only got myself to blame. So this is about 7 minutes, and it's time to take it out and get it cool. So I'm gonna put it on a large plate just so that I've got more surface area to cool it down. There we go, we want that completely cold before we start making our dumplings. Now we're gonna move on to the sauce, which I'll be making in a stainless steel pan from today's sponsor, Maiden. Maiden design professional and quality products for the home cook. They partner with multi-generational factories and artisans from around the world to bring you great cookware products for you to have in your home. The products we're using today are from their stainless steel clad cookware, which is the fry pan, the saute pan, and the stock pot. And they were crafted in Italy using premium materials to create fantastic all-purpose cookware. These stainless steel clad pots and pans have a 5-ply stainless steel material which allows for superior heat retention, even heating, and ease of heat control, which is what we want when we're cooking sauces like this, so it doesn't catch in one spot and start to taste bitter. The saute pan I'll be using to make the sauce is deep enough for simmering and sauteing, but also has a big enough open so the liquid can evaporate when we're trying to reduce sauces. It also has a curved edge, making it super easy to pour out sauces without getting messy. Check out the Stainless Clad collection and Maiden's other cookware products by using the link in my description. And a huge thank you to Maiden for sponsoring this video. Now let's get the sauce on. So to our pan, we're gonna add about a cup of water, and then we've got some dried chilies here. Just gonna make sure we don't take the stems off and pop those in, and turn our heat on. So this is where you can really dial up the temperature if you want to use a really spicy chili. These are just kind of like those, the irregular large dried chilies. So while those are softening, we've got some tomatoes. We've got 5 tomatoes here. Now you can take the skins off these if you want to, but I mean, we're gonna blend it. I wouldn't bother. Just dice those up. Doesn't really matter, they're gonna get blended anyway. And in those go as well. So here I've got some coriander root that I've washed really well. I'm gonna run our knife through it. And that goes. Got a nice big piece of ginger. Grate that straight in. So garlic, gonna use about 6 cloves. So you can just crush them and then pop them straight in as well. Obviously peel them. Now we're gonna add about 2 tablespoons of soy sauce, a tablespoon of vinegar, and 1 tablespoon of brown sugar. All right, we're gonna give this a stir. I'm just gonna cook this and simmer this for that water to evaporate and those tomatoes to really start breaking down before we blend it. Smells pretty good. All right, we're about 6 or 7 minutes later and it's time to blend. So we're gonna pour this into a jug. I nailed that. These guys thought I wasn't gonna get that in there, but perfect. Daz never believes me. Give her a blend. Let's have a little taste. Oh, it's tasty. Good. Definitely not ditch proof. Little pinch of salt. All right, we'll let that get to room temp, and in the meantime, we're gonna make our dough. So the dumpling wrappers are super easy. The only thing that I would say is use your intuition with how much water you're using, because there's a lot of things that can kind of play into the hydration of the dough. So we're gonna start with roughly 2 cups of flour. As you can see, I'm not being particularly precise. And a pinch of salt. Give that a mix, and then I'm gonna add some water. So just add a little bit, start bringing it together. Really not too much of an issue if you add too much, because you can just add more flour if you need to. But yeah, I'd rather be adding liquid to it